All of you, this is your last awakening ceremony. If you still fail to awaken, prepare to live the rest of your life as an ordinary human and attend a normal university. You can also try to improve your cultivation in these last few months to increase your chances of entering an academy. The teacher's voice echoed across the room as several students stood before him, listening attentively, their expressions a mix of anxiety and hope. Among these students was Michael. Michael was not from this world. He had arrived in this body just 3 weeks ago, a body that coincidentally shared his name. Unlike his original world, in this one, everyone between the ages of 16 and 18 had a chance to awaken a class. More than 200 years ago, the apocalypse descended upon this world, bringing spatial rifts that spawned countless monsters and unleashed chaos. Fortunately, following the apocalypse, the world became digitized for a select few who would later be known as Awakeners. Thanks to these Awakeners, whose classes granted them incredible powers, the apocalypse ended after decades, and humanity finally reclaimed their land. When peace returned, as expected, Awakeners became figures of importance, and it became a dream for young people aged 16 to 18 to become one. However, becoming an Awakener was a privilege granted to only a few, and for this group of 18-year-old students, this was their last chance. Michael was nervous too. Though he had only been in this world for 3 weeks, he understood the significance of this ceremony. While it wasn't as though all hope would be lost if he failed to awaken, it was undeniable that no path held more promise than becoming an Awakener. Under the nervous gaze of nearly 100 students below the podium, the teacher picked up a file from the table in front of him and began to call out names. Lillian Stone. Why, yes, sir. The first student called was a young woman. Upon hearing her name, she immediately walked toward the podium, but perhaps due to her nervousness, she stumbled and fell. However, no one laughed or made fun of her. On any other occasion, they might have, but today, they weren't sure they would perform any better than the student who had fallen. The teacher, seemingly accustomed to such mishaps, waited patiently for her to get back on her feet and approach him. When she finally reached him, he wasted no time and gestured toward the transparent orb on the table. This is your 3rd time here, so you know what to do. Just place your hand on the awakening orb. If there's a reaction, it means you've successfully awakened. If there isn't, the teacher left his sentence unfinished, but it made the hearts of the students on the podium sink. Michael felt it too, though he handled it better than the others. Thanks to his mental age and the challenges he'd faced before he died from cancer in his previous life, he could keep his composure. Michael's eyes were drawn to the awakening orb on the table between the teacher and the female student. From what they had been taught in school, every Awakener, aside from gaining a class that granted them supernatural powers, also had the ability to connect their consciousness to another world. A world filled with treasures and could quickly enhance their prowess. It was said that this world really resembled a game, though in many ways it was not. The awakening orb itself originated from that mysterious world. Just as the teacher had said, the girl didn't require any assistance. With a familiarity that made the corner of Michael's eyes twitch slightly, she placed both hands on the awakening orb and waited. A few seconds passed, and just as the teacher was preparing to dismiss the disappointed girl, who looked like she might burst into tears at any moment, a white light suddenly shone from the orb. Following that, a manifestation, in the form of twin swords, appeared on her back before disappearing. Lillian Stone has successfully awakened a class martial artist, the teacher announced, his voice filled with surprise, and his previously expressionless face showing clear astonishment. For this group of 18-year-olds, he hadn't expected any of them to awaken. But to think that the very first student called up would do so filled him with considerable surprise. It was well known that the best age to awaken a class was 16, as that was when the chances were highest. The older one got, the less likely awakening became. When the students heard the teacher's announcement, the previously quiet hall erupted with noise. Wow! Lillian actually awakened? First come, first served? Damn! TSK, to think the 4th to the last dumbest person in all of Class 3 would awaken. You do know that awakening successfully doesn't necessarily have anything to do with intelligence, right? Shut up. Of course, I know. Can't I just be bitter for a minute? What happened to my freedom to be negative? Like his fellow classmates, Michael was pleasantly surprised that the first student to step onto the podium had awakened. It was common knowledge that their group had almost no hope of awakening. So seeing someone succeed lifted everyone's spirits and filled them with a renewed sense of hope. However, that newly lit hope was quickly shattered. Mia Keem, awakening failed. Bruce Lean, awakening failed. Then the 4th, the 5th, all the way up to the 48th, every student who stepped up to the podium failed to awaken except for the first female student. The entire hall felt as silent as a graveyard, save for the quiet sobs of those who had failed their awakening. Share to your friends. Chapter 1 Class Awakening. Michael tried his best to ignore the cries of his fellow classmates around him. Failing to awaken in this world was not like failing a college exam on Earth. In the latter case, you could keep trying, and many alternatives weren't considered worse than attending college. But here, failing to awaken had no equivalent alternative. It was like a poor man, burdened with the responsibility of caring for his 2 chronically ill parents while also supporting a younger sibling through school, betting on 3 different games with a chance to win $1 million each, and losing everything. In such a situation, breaking down and crying wouldn't be unusual. The scene around Michael now was eerily similar. Most of the students at Woodstone Public School No. 3 came from families living near or below the poverty line. For them, successfully awakening was like having $100 million land in their lap. But for these sobbing students, that distant hope of drastically changing their lives had slipped through their fingers 3 times in a row. It was no wonder that some of them broke down in tears immediately. Michael tried not to let the dark atmosphere surrounding him affect his mindset and attempted to stay positive. His situation wasn't any better than those around him, if not worse. In this world, the original owner of this body was an orphan living with his aunt, a widow with a child of her own to care for. Together, the family of 3 barely survived on the limited funds his aunt managed to earn. For Michael, successfully awakening was the fastest way to change his family's fate. But his chance of awakening was less than 1%. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of bitterness. Though he was grateful for the chance to live again, especially in a healthy body, it would be painful to live a life of mediocrity. Yet, there was nothing he could do about his slim chance of awakening. All he could do was hope for the best. Michael continued to watch as more students stepped up to the podium, only to fail in their attempts to awaken. There were only a total of 86 students in the hall, so Michael's turn was approaching quickly. Since the teacher hadn't assigned a cue and called names at random, Michael could only wait for his turn. Just when the teacher in charge of the awakenings thought that this batch of students would only produce 1 awakener, the awakening orb in front of him suddenly emitted light. The cause of the reaction was a male student standing before him. Just like the female student who had first awakened, a manifestation appeared, standard for new awakeners. The male student's body glowed red, and a staff made of fire appeared in his hands before promptly disappearing. Brian Lien has successfully awakened a class, Fire Mage, the teacher announced. As with the first awakening, an uproar erupted in the hall, but this time it was even more intense. Damn, Brian actually awakened. The heavens really aren't fair. I know, right? He's already one of the few students who managed to ignite their life seeds before the college exams. Something rare even in big cities. And now he's lucky enough to awaken too. That's not all. His night breathing technique happens to align with the fire attribute. And now that he's awakened as a fire mage, the two will complement each other perfectly. F***CK. Like his classmates, Michael also had an impression of Brian. At Woodstone Public High School No. 3, Brian Lien was one of the few outstanding students who could hold his own against those from private schools with better resources, despite his humble background. His reputation extended beyond the school. He was even somewhat known throughout Woodstone City. This fame wasn't because of his academic achievements, but rather due to his exceptional talent in cultivation. The Awakening Orb wasn't the only piece of technology that Awakeners had brought back from the mysterious realm known as the Land of Origins. They introduced other technologies that significantly boosted the real world's advancement. The Land of Origins wasn't exclusive to humans. Many other civilizations of various races existed there. In fact, humans here could be considered newcomers to that world. These civilizations had already used the land of origins to significantly advance their own societies. Using their methods, awakeners managed to bring something back to this world. Cultivation. Cultivation offered a method for ordinary people to gain supernatural powers. Although they couldn't progress as quickly as awakeners, be as powerful as them, or enter the land of origins. Brian practiced the breathing technique of the night cultivation system and had considerable talent in cultivation, so even if he failed to awaken, he still had a bright future. Just as awakeners were respected and needed in this world, cultivators were too. One was just way too at the top to be compared to anything, but the need of the two were equal. Well, according to what has been told to Michael, the world changed when the apocalypse descended. It was no longer just a planet but a realm. Planet Aurora became the Aurora realm. Some of the cracks that brought monsters into the world remained, with new ones occasionally appearing. Some were filled with monsters, while others served as passages to other realms. Awakeners were few in number, so cultivators were needed to handle these realms. Awakeners advanced society, while cultivators kept it safe. This was something that had been taught to Michael and other children from a young age. Becoming an awakener was more desirable, though. Cultivating required resources, and they weren't cheap, with costs only increasing as one progressed. This alone had already cut off more than half of the population's ability to walk on this path. Generally, only the talented or the wealthy had a significant chance of achieving great success in cultivation. The teacher, who hadn't even smiled much when Lillian Stone awakened, now had a wide grin as he addressed Brian. "Come stand here and wait," he said, pointing to the spot beside him where Lillian Stone also stood. He was thrilled that a genius from the school had just become even more exceptional. A super genius. After settling that, the teacher continued with the awakening ceremony, but he was met with disappointment as no other student managed to awaken. Not even those with talent in cultivation. This wasn't unexpected. Just because a student had talent in cultivation didn't mean they would awaken a class, especially not at the age of 18. However, the teacher remained quite pleased, as the school now had 2 more awakeners to its name. The awakening ceremony continued, and soon it was time for the 80th student to step up to the podium, Michael. Michael Norman. Yes, sir. Hearing his name called, Michael nervously made his way up to the podium. Since the previous owner of this body didn't have much presence at school, he didn't have anyone cheering for him. Soon, Michael reached the podium, and under the teacher's guidance, he placed his hands, now unknowingly sweating, on the awakening orb, filled with anticipation. Share to your friends. Chapter 2 Cultivation. Seconds ticked by, and Michael could almost hear his own heartbeat pounding in his chest. Each student was allocated 30 seconds with the awakening orb. Any more time was pointless, as it had been proven over the years. 10 seconds passed. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. 25 seconds. Just as the teacher prepared to dismiss Michael, whose heart had already sunk into bitterness, the awakening orb under Michael's hands suddenly emitted a bright light. Instantly, Michael felt a warm sensation coursing through his body. His mind seemed to clear, and a surge of strength flowed through him. The manifestation that accompanied every new awakener soon appeared. A black, gloomy energy swirled around Michael, coating his body, while a dark staff briefly materialized in his hand before everything vanished. Michael was momentarily stunned by the sudden turn of events, but the voice of the equally surprised teacher brought him back to reality. Michael Norman has successfully awakened a class, Necromancer, the teacher announced. Another one? Necromancer, huh? That sounds powerful and maybe a little bit evil. Be more confident in your speech, brother. It's evil as fuck. Yeah, but as long as I can awaken a class, I wouldn't even mind if it involved selling my body. Just say you're horny, bro. As before, an uproar erupted in the hall, but it was more subdued than the previous 2 times. It couldn't be helped, unlike the excitement over Lillian Stone's unexpected awakening or the amazement at Brian Lien's transformation into a super genius. Michael didn't have much of a presence in the school, but that wasn't the case anymore. Also, only a few of his classmates from Class 3, Section N8 were in the hall, and he recognized even fewer of them. He didn't personally know any of them. Good, 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 the teacher in charge of the ceremony said, repeating the word 3 times in delight. It wasn't that he knew Michael personally, but rather because a ceremony he had expected to yield no awakeners had surprisingly produced 3. If none had awakened, he wouldn't have been surprised. Such outcomes were common. Come stand beside me and wait. The teacher gestured for Michael to join the other 2 awakeners. Yes, teacher. Michael nodded, still in a daze, and compiled. Seeing a new comrade, Lillian and Brian both gave him a nod of acknowledgement, which Michael returned. In truth, Michael's attention was no longer fully on his surroundings. He could catch bits of what his classmates whispered about him, but he was too preoccupied to care. His attention was on what had just appeared before his eyes. A blue, transparent panel floated in front of Michael. Name: Michael Norman. Race: human. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 1. EXP 0/100. Strength 1.3. Agility 1.4. Constitution 1.2. Intelligence 4.5. Attribute points 0. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class skill: Contract slot 0 halves. Gift: Mark of Origin. Michael's mind wasn't focused on the details displayed on the panel. It was only now that he fully grasped what had just happened. He had awakened. He had really awakened. A surge of happiness rushed through him, and his tense shoulders finally relaxed. While this was only the beginning, the most important thing was that he had awakened. No matter what came next, his future now held new possibilities. Michael let out a deep sigh of relief and turned his attention back to the rest of the awakening ceremony. Only 6 students remained, and in about 4 minutes the ceremony would conclude. Each student would soon return home, left to ponder their future based on the outcome of their awakening. Now that he no longer felt nervous, Michael's mind was free to think of other things. The most important realization was that he had awakened a class, the Necromancer class. In truth, Michael knew little about awakeners and their classes beyond what he had learned in school and from hearsay. What he did know was that classes were generally categorized into 3 types: combat, support, and lifestyle. His Necromancer class seemed like a mix of both combat and support, but Michael wasn't entirely sure. Aside from the knight and mage classes that were so influential in this world, he knew little about other classes. The school only taught general knowledge about awakeners without going into much depth. Perhaps the higher-ups felt that students who were unlikely to awaken didn't need to know more and could better use their time studying or cultivating. It's also said that if one cultivated before awakening and had talent in it, they could activate a secondary class, so cultivation was seen as a good thing overall. Michael wasn't sure if limited information was unique to Woodstone Public High School number 3, but he did know one thing for certain. There was no discrimination between classes. There was no such thing as an overly weak class, as all classes theoretically had no limits. Power depended on the awakeners themselves. According to the teachers, this even applied to lifestyle classes like tailors. Michael wasn't sure how true this was, but he figured he'd find out soon enough. After all, he was now an awakener, someone who should be valued by the government. Just as Michael sorted out his thoughts and was about to check the panel that had appeared in his mind earlier, the voice of the teacher in charge of the awakening ceremony caught his attention. Okay, that's it for today. For those of you who failed to awaken, remember that failing to become an awakener doesn't mean your futures are bleak. During the early days of the apocalypse, at least half of our ancestors who played a crucial role in our survival and advancement were ordinary people. So what if you didn't awaken? The sad students below the podium heard this, and a wave of motivation surged through them. Even Michael couldn't help but be impressed by the teacher's words. However, he knew that once they left the hall, the harsh reality would soon catch up to them. Perhaps some of the students already understood this, but they needed something to make them feel better at the moment. One must know that while this world was technically more advanced than Michael's previous one, it wasn't all sunshine for the average person. For example, bankers had long become a thing of the past along with many other jobs. Only a few establishments still employed people for tasks that machines could do, either because they were too poor or wanted to be classy, like some upscale hotels. Most people in this world live in poverty, barely scraping by with the few jobs available to them. It was only after arriving in this world that Michael truly understood a saying from his old life. Technology can be both a blessing and a curse. This desperation to escape their current circumstances was one of the reasons why these students so desperately wanted to become awakeners. If Michael hadn't awakened, he would have been on the receiving end of the teacher's encouragement too. He knew he was truly lucky. Seeing that his words had resonated with the students, the teacher nodded slightly in satisfaction before speaking again. The college exams for both regular colleges and cultivation academies are in 3 months, so make sure to prepare seriously during this time. Just because you don't need to come to school again after today doesn't mean you should slack off. Okay? Yes, sir. The students, including Michael and the 2 other new awakeners, responded loudly. All right, you're dismissed. As the students made their way out of the hall, the teacher turned to Michael, Lillian, and Brian. With a smile, he said, "You 3, follow me to the principal's office. Share to your friends." Chapter 3 Successful Awakening. The moment the teacher in charge of the awakening ceremony left the hall with Michael and the 2 other new awakeners, they encountered 2 teachers, a male and a female, on their way to the principal's office. Following the male teacher was a young girl, who seemed to be around 17 or 18 years old. Behind the female teacher were 5 younger-looking students, 2 boys and 3 girls. From the brief conversation between the 3 teachers, Michael learned that the students accompanying them had successfully awakened as well. The girl following the male teacher was also from Class 3, though Michael didn't recognize her. That wasn't surprising. After all, Woodstone was a public school with over 600 students in Class 3 alone. There were 9 sections in Class 3, each with up to 100 students max per teacher. Although the classes rarely reached full capacity, since that would make even the large classrooms feel cramped, there were usually no fewer than 60 students per class. As for the 5 students behind the female teacher, they were from Class 1. Michael had guessed this due to their younger appearance, but he was still shocked by the number of awakeners in that class. In fact, he was surprised by how many students had successfully awakened this year in general. Including the students from Class 3, a total of 9 students had awakened. While this might seem small compared to Woodstone's overall student population, it was actually significant. Even Class 1, which consisted of 16-year-olds, the age group most likely to awaken, rarely had this many for awakeners in a single year. In all the years Michael had been in senior high, the total number of students who had successfully awakened, from his time in Class 1 through Class 3, including the older students, barely exceeded 12. And most of those awakeners had been from Class 1. This year, not a single student from Class 2, where most students were 17 years old, had awakened. Therefore, the number of awakeners at Woodstone Public High School this year was unusually high, and Class 3's success, in particular, was downright abnormal for reasons unknown. As Michael mused over his thoughts, they soon reached the principal's office. Upon reaching the door, the only female teacher among them took the initiative to knock. "Principal?" she called out. "Come in." A voice responded from within the office. With permission granted, the female teacher took the lead and entered the room. Inside, a middle-aged man sat behind a desk. Michael recognized him. He was the principal of Woodstone Public High School No. 3, Mike Bill. It was rumored that he was a powerful knight, though Michael wasn't sure, as he had never seen the man in action. Setting aside the document he had been focused on, Principal Mike turned to smile at the newcomers. 9 awakeners this year. Heavens must really favor our school, the principal remarked, pleasantly surprised by the number of students in his office. It was customary for new awakeners to meet with the principal alongside their teachers, so he was confident he hadn't made a mistake. Seeing no one contradict his statement, he knew his assumption was correct. With this confirmation, the smile on Principal Mike's face grew even brighter. "I believe your teachers have already informed you why you're here, yes?" Principal Mike asked, glancing at Michael and the other students in his office. "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. "Haha, there's no need to be nervous. What I'm about to tell you is probably something you already know, but I'll still say it," the principal said with a light chuckle. Michael and the other students subconsciously straightened their backs. The principal paid no mind to this and continued. "As you know, as awakeners, your life and future are now different from those of ordinary people. Power and wealth are within your grasp, if you're wise enough to seize them. If you had failed to awaken, you would be preparing to enter an ordinary university to further your education. If you had decent talent in cultivation, you'd try to enter a cultivation academy. But you all have successfully awakened. So instead of attending a cultivation academy or an ordinary university, you'll be going to an awakened university, where you'll learn everything you need to know about being an awakener. You might think that going to an academy is unnecessary since you could just enter the land of origin on your own, like our ancestors, and make things work. While that's possible, anyone with good sense wouldn't do that. Why make things harder for yourself? So, right now, aside from entering the land of origin, which you'll soon have access to, getting into an Awakener Academy should be your next main focus. As for learning more about your new identity as an Awakener, you'll need to visit the Supers Association to register after this. The association will provide you with better information that you currently need." The principal then went on to mention a few other points. Some of these Michael and the others already knew, while others provided new insights. After saying what he needed to, Principal Mike dismissed the students and teachers, asking Brian to stay behind. After being dismissed from the principal's office, the teacher responsible for overseeing Michael's awakening spoke up. "As new awakeners, you must register with the Supers Association within 3 days. Failing to do so is considered a crime. Though you have some time, I recommend you register immediately if you're free today." As the principal mentioned, you also need to take the upcoming college exams seriously. Just because you're awakeners doesn't exempt you from academic testing. While it may not be as strict as for regular university students due to your status, it's still important depending on the academy you plan to attend. Anyway, the Supers Association will have more details on this, so make sure you register quickly. For those who aren't in their 3rd year, the teacher addressed the students from Class 1. You can also attempt the college exams if you think you're up for it, as the Federation and most academies do not oppose it. However, most awakeners who manage to awaken before their 3rd year prefer to take home lessons while honing their skills as awakeners, aiming for a higher score when they're ready to enter the academy. After offering this advice, and with 2 other teachers sharing their own, they left the 9 students and returned to the teacher's office. There was no need to flatter the new awakeners. These were no longer the apocalyptic days. Although the teachers were softer with them compared to before, it wasn't to the point of bowing at their feet, but they certainly didn't want to offend them either. With the rise of cultivation, awakeners were no longer the only powerful people in the world. Ordinary individuals could reach similar levels of strength, though awakeners were a rarer breed. Veteran teachers like these knew that leaving a good impression was enough, as they had no hidden agendas. Share to your friends. Chapter 4 Meeting the Principal. The students felt a little lost after the teachers left, but not Michael. He already knew what he needed to do next. The most important task was to register at the Supers Association, and the second was to inform his aunt about his awakening. Michael was already familiar with the Supers Association. Even before he transmigrated into this world, the original owner of his body had a basic understanding of it. This was common knowledge among the natives. The Supers Association was an organization under the Federation, the new government established after the apocalypse. The world now had only one ruling authority, the Federation, under which were countries, states, and cities. The Supers Association managed all supernatural beings in the Aurora realm. Ordinary humans had to be a rank 1 cultivator before they could register, whereas awakeners were required to register immediately upon awakening, as they became supernatural beings the moment they awakened. The purpose of the Supers Association was to protect the general public, manage supernatural beings, and provide them with various benefits. Michael made his way out of the school compound. As soon as he stepped outside, He hailed an empty taxi that happened to be passing by. "To the Supers Association," he said. "That'll be $1, the driver replied. "Okay." The Supers Association was a little far from Woodstone Public School. On foot, it would take Michael about 35 minutes, but by taxi, it would take no more than 20. Settling into the passenger seat, Michael pulled his phone from his pocket. Normally, if the school were still in session, it would have been in his backpack. But with the college exams approaching and no real need to attend classes, everything aside from his school uniform was casual today. Every senior high student who came to school today did so primarily for the awakening ceremony. After today, the school would feel noticeably emptier. Though the technology in this world was more advanced than Earth's, familiar technologies still existed. The rich used floating cars, while the less well-off relied on vehicles with wheels. The wealthy had watches that projected holographic displays as substitutes for phones, while others were content with traditional phones. The world was a mix of old and new technology, but somehow it all blended into a strange yet harmonious system that didn't seem out of place. Michael decided to text his aunt instead of calling her. She worked as a cook at a relatively upscale restaurant, so she was likely still busy. Michael sent a short message saying he had succeeded in his awakening. Just as he was about to put his phone aside, an incoming call flashed on the screen. It was his aunt. Michael immediately answered the call. "Aunt, aren't you at work?" Michael immediately inquired. It was rare for his aunt to answer so quickly, even on her days off. "I'm still at work. I just happened to be on a short break when your message came in." His aunt, Aunt Mia, replied. Michael believed her, as he could hear the noise in the background. "Mike," his aunt called out, her tone hesitant as if she wanted to say something but was unsure. "Ma." Michael smiled, already guessing what was on her mind. He understood her disbelief. Most parents were shocked when their children awakened on their first try, let alone Michael, who had even less of a chance. "Your message?" Aunt Mia began slowly, pausing before continuing. "Is it true?" "It is, Aunt Mia. Today's my lucky day. Haha." Michael chuckled in response. Aunt Mia let out a small squeak of joy, clearly trying to contain her excitement. Knowing she was still at work, Michael decided to end the conversation so she could get back to her duties. "I'm on my way to the Supers Association, Aunt. I'll talk to you when you get home." Okay. I'll transfer some money to you now. Get yourself something to eat and save a little for Lily when she gets back from school. I might be home a little late today." "Yes, Aunt." After exchanging a few more words, they ended the call. Michael let out a sigh as happiness surged through him. Though he was originally from Earth, he had fully embraced his role as Michael in this world and cared deeply for his family here. Perhaps it had something to do with losing his parents early in life back on Earth. In a way, both Michaels had experienced particularly difficult childhoods. After ending the call, Michael closed his eyes to rest, ignoring the driver's gaze, who seemed like he had something to ask. Only now did he realize how tense he had been in the awakening hall, leaving his spirit weary. It had only been a few minutes since Michael decided to rest when he felt a nudge from the driver. "We're here," the driver said. Michael weakly opened his eyes, still a bit dazed. But when he saw the two-story building not far from him, his mind cleared and he quickly sat up. "Your code, please," Michael requested. "Here," the driver compiled, showing Michael a code on his phone, which Michael then scanned with his own phone, transferring the fare to the driver's account. "Thanks for the ride," Michael said. "No problem. Congratulations on your awakening. By the way," watching the driver drive away and hearing his last words, a smile appeared on Michael's face. If the driver wasn't certain when he overheard the conversation with Michael's aunt earlier, he would be now, having seen how focused Michael was on the Supers Association branch as he got out of the car. Michael shook his head and refocused. Taking a deep breath, he made his way toward the entrance of the Supers Association. Share to your friends. Chapter 5 Registering as an Awakener 1. The inside of the Supers Association branch was a bit noisy, which surprised Michael greatly. Outside, he hadn't heard much sound, so he expected the building to be quiet, but it wasn't. There were actually quite a lot of people, most of them appearing very young. Michael didn't need to think much to realize that these people were probably new awakeners just like him. With only 2 Supers Association branches in Woodstone City, it wasn't surprising to see many awakeners despite their rarity. Since all schools nationwide had chosen today for the awakening ceremony this year, most of the young people in the Supers Association building were likely the new awakeners from Woodstone City. After today, the number of new awakeners registering over the next 2 days should be low. Michael glanced around, and a rough count suggested there were at least 30 students present. This was quite a number, considering they all came from the 9 public and private schools in Woodstone City. As he took in his surroundings, Michael lined up behind one of the shorter queues leading to the reception table. He wasn't sure what to expect when he reached the front, but seeing others his age, likely fellow new awakeners, gave him some idea. Fortunately, Michael didn't have to wait long. 28 minutes later, he was near the front, with only one person ahead of him. Behind him, more people had joined the line. As Michael waited, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a new message. $300 has been transferred to your account 27 asterisk 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 78. XXXX Bank International. From Mia Grace. Your current account balance is $461. $300? That's quite a lot. Michael felt a little uncomfortable seeing how much his aunt had sent. Aunt Mia's monthly salary was only about $3,000, excluding occasional bonuses, and she had just transferred a tenth of it. Considering it was mid-June and Mia's salary typically arrived at the beginning of the month, this $300 could very well be a quarter of what she had left. Even back on Earth, $3,000 wasn't much for a family to live on. The $161 balance he had before was what remained from the $300 monthly allowance Aunt Mia gave him. Though Michael was concerned, he couldn't help but feel a warm sensation in his chest. He was truly loved in this world, something he had rarely felt back on Earth, where he had even faced his battle with cancer alone, with no one to care for him. As he thought of his family, Michael secretly clenched his fist, silently vowing once again to change their lives and take care of them. However, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. Is becoming an awakener truly life-changing for the average person? To be honest, everyone had been raised to believe that becoming an awakener was a one-way ticket to the top. But beyond the power it brought, the exact reasons and ways it transformed a life remained a mystery to most. It was common knowledge that power brought wealth, though. Michael, who had barely lived his adult years, was well aware of this. As various thoughts flashed through his mind, it was soon Michael's turn at the reception table. "Good day, sir. What can I do for you?" the lady behind the counter asked. She seemed to be in her late 20s and wore a professional smile. Her calm demeanor eased Michael's troubled mind a little, allowing him to reply calmly, "I'm here to register." "As?" the lady inquired, glancing down at his school uniform. Usually, there were only 2 types of students who came to register: new awakeners or those talented enough to reach rank 1 as cultivators while still in school. Today was the National Awakening Ceremony Day, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. "Yes, I'm here to register as an awakener," Michael confirmed. "Oh, I see," the lady replied, not appearing surprised by his response. After confirming his purpose, she began asking Michael a few questions. Most were about his personal details like his name, age, and address. She even asked for his bank account number for some reason, which Michael provided without hesitation. Thankfully, the process was quick and surprisingly straightforward. "Aren't you going to ask about my class?" Michael asked, curious. "There's no need for that, Mr. Michael. Your school will provide that information to us," the lady replied in her signature smile. "Ah, I see," Michael said, understanding now. "I thought she might have forgotten to ask, but it makes sense. Even if the Supers Association had a way to verify one's class, doing it for every new registrant would take too much time." After pressing his fingerprint on a tool the lady provided and signing his name on a freshly printed document, she addressed him again, this time in a more formal tone. "Congratulations on your awakening, Mr. Michael. As of today, you are now a proud warrior of the Federation the people, and the Aurora realm. As a new awakener of the Federation, a set of military cultivation techniques and martial techniques will be sent to your email. A link to a specially designed platform for supernaturals will also be provided. The password is your full name written in all caps, followed by this year's number, 228, with no spaces in between. Also, as a new awakener, you are eligible for a monthly payment of $15,000. This amount will be reduced by half if you fail to reach rank 1 within 6 months and will be revoked if you fail to become a rank 2 awakener within a year. Of course, the monthly payment will also increase alongside your advancement. Michael was a little overwhelmed by the sudden information dump, but one thing immediately caught his attention. Money. It wasn't just the money. Other benefits came with it too. Though the conditions seemed strict, it didn't change the fact that he was soon going to have a significant income. Michael's heart quickened a little, but before he could sink deeper into his thoughts, the lady behind the counter spoke again. "Is there anything else you'd like to ask about, Mr. Michael?" He was about to reflexively say no, since he had grasped most of what she said when he remembered something. Feeling suddenly bashful with a red face, he inquired in a low tone, "When will the monthly benefit arrive, miss?" The lady was visibly taken aback, but after regaining her composure, her smile grew even brighter, and it seemed she was struggling to hold back a laugh. Her reaction made Michael feel even more embarrassed, but thankfully, she didn't dwell on it. "It should arrive within an hour at most, sir," she replied. Michael nodded slightly, thanking the woman behind the counter before quickly making his way out of the Supers Association building. Though he didn't regret asking about the money, he couldn't help but feel a little self-conscious, worried it might have come across as if he cared more about the money than anything else, though in truth he kind of did. Anyway, with this, the house shouldn't be low on funds in a few months. Aunt won't have to work so hard anymore, and she and Lily can take better care of themselves now. Michael was filled with joy, but he didn't let his happiness blind him. He knew nothing came free in this world. Even as an awakener, the Federation wouldn't just hand out money without expecting something in return. Though it seems complicated, according to that lady, all I have to do to retain the benefits, and even improve them, is to get stronger. Michael had a clear goal now, to increase his strength quickly and make life better for himself and his family. Successfully awakening was just the beginning. But before anything else, he needed to get home and study more about awakeners once the Supers Association sent him the information. Share to your friends. Chapter 6 Registering as an Awakener 2. The journey back home required Michael to take another taxi, which he didn't hesitate to pay for. Though he felt his body had gotten stronger since his awakening, it didn't mean he had to push himself unnecessarily. His home was nowhere close to the Supers Association. From his school to his house was a 30-minute walk, and with the Supers Association's location added in, it would take him at least an hour and a half to get home. Now that he had money in his account and was soon going to receive much more, Michael didn't see any reason to be frugal. While in the taxi, he sent his aunt a message letting her know he was done registering at the Supers Association and was on his way home. It was also around this time that a bank notification arrived, informing him that $15,000 had been transferred to his account. I'm rich. Though Michael had seen larger sums in his previous life, it was easy to forget that he was currently playing the role of an 18-year-old, something he had fully embraced. Unlike earlier, when Aunt Mia had responded immediately, there was no quick reply this time, which didn't surprise Michael. He had considered sending Aunt Mia a portion of the money he received, but knowing her, she would probably panic and it might affect her work. Since there was no need to rush, he decided to wait until she got back home. Michael didn't have the taxi drop him directly at his house, but rather at a mall near the community where his house was located. He hadn't forgotten his aunt's request to buy something for himself and his cousin, though he decided to use the money he received from the government instead of the amount she had given him. When his aunt returned later in the evening, he planned to return her money, along with extra. By the time Michael left the mall, he was carrying several bags. This round of shopping had cost him about $500. It might seem excessive to spend money like this, but Michael didn't regret it. For now, it was time for his family to enjoy life a little more. After all, what was the point of having money if not to spend it on oneself and loved ones? Of course, Michael had a limit to how much he would spend. He didn't know much yet, but he suspected that the government didn't provide benefits to new awakeners purely out of goodwill. He had a feeling that part of the money was meant to be a resource for growth. There's no need to overthink it. I'll understand better once I check the emails from the Supers Association. By the time Michael finally got home, the sun had already set. The awakening ceremony had been held at 12:30 in the afternoon, and now it was a little past 4 p.m. Lily will be back from school soon. Let me use this time to get things in order. And Michael did just that. He put the food products in their respective places and organized the rest of his purchases accordingly. I'm so tired. By the time Michael was done, he was famished. He had only had a light breakfast that morning, so he decided to cook something for himself using some of the ingredients he had bought from the mall. Meat was on the menu, too. Thanks to living with an aunt who was a chef, Michael's cooking skills weren't bad at all. He made rice and fried meat, and just as he finished, his cousin Lily arrived home. Lily, like her mom, had black hair, blue eyes, and a short stature. Michael, on the other hand, stood out in their family with his blonde hair, green eyes, and tall build. It wasn't surprising to the family of three, as they knew he wasn't an immediate relative, but it often puzzled outsiders who assumed they were directly related, at least until they heard their different surnames. "Good evening, Brother Michael," Lily greeted as she poked her head through the kitchen door. "What are you cooking? Is that meat? It smells so good." Watching his cousin drool, Michael smiled helplessly. "Go wash up first before you think of eating. I'll serve you a plate in the meantime." "Okay, Brother Michael." The foodie immediately turned to leave without saying anything else. However, she came back a few seconds later and stared at Michael hesitantly. "What happened?" Michael asked, confused. "Brother Michael," Lily began, her hands behind her back and her head lowered. "How was the awakening ceremony?" "Oh, so that's what this is about." Michael sighed at how similar the mother-daughter duo was. They didn't want to hurt his feelings, yet they didn't pretend to ignore them. Lily heard Michael sigh and thought it was because he had failed to awaken. "Don't be too sad, Brother Michael. Even if you fail to awaken, it's not like the world has ended. I believe you can also become a powerful cultivator and enter those mysterious realms. Even if you can't access the land of origin, the future is still bright." Michael was speechless when he heard this. When did I say I failed to awaken? What's going on in this 15-year-old's mind? However, soon Michael burst into laughter, clearly amused. Lily was stunned when she saw Michael laugh until tears formed in his eyes. She wondered if he had gone mad from sadness. Maybe that explained why he had been so unusually calm earlier. Michael couldn't bear to see the increasingly worried look on his cousin's face, so he addressed her. "Who said I failed to awaken, silly? Why do you think we're having meat if there wasn't a special occasion?" "Ha!" Michael then gave her a brief summary of the events that happened that afternoon. He didn't go into much detail about the Supers Association but did mention the money. "Wow, Brother Michael, you're rich. What are you thinking? Stop looking at me like that. Brother Michael. Hey, give me some money." Michael spent some time getting his sisters focus off his account balance with a few promises. Watching her hum and skip away in happiness, a gentle smile appeared on his face. Though it seemed like she was more excited about the money, he knew she was genuinely happy about his successful awakening. Michael took a deep breath and steeled himself before carrying a plate of food to his room. He had delayed for long enough. It was time to finally learn more about this awakening business. Share to your friends. Chapter 7 Information about Awakeners and the Land of Origin 1. Michael's family lived in a rented 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a 6-story building, with 4 apartments on each floor. The living conditions and environment could be described as passable. Michael figured that once he had more money in the future, he would move his family to a better place. The young man was filled with dreams and plans for the future. Among the 2 bedrooms, one belonged to Michael, while the other was shared by his cousin and aunt. Michael always felt guilty about this arrangement, and this feeling carried over after his transmigration. Regardless of whatever ties they shared, it didn't change the fact that he wasn't their immediate family member. But perhaps it was like a saying he had heard on Earth. Family isn't decided by blood. After entering his relatively empty room, Michael sat on a chair next to a desk filled with books and placed his plate on the table. Taking a mouthful of rice with his spoon, he brought out his phone and opened his email. There, he found several messages from the Supers Association. The first message he saw was a congratulatory note on his awakening, with a file containing the set of military standard cultivation techniques that the lady at the counter had mentioned. The file contained a breathing technique that had no specific attribute and a meditative technique that was purely aimed at increasing his mana pool, also without any elemental attribute. Michael knew what breathing and meditative techniques were. After all, he had also practiced the free breathing technique provided by the Federation to its citizens, though he had no noticeable talent for cultivation. However, this was where his confusion began. Though Michael had not yet taken the time to study the panel in his mind, he knew he wasn't mistaken when he saw a level-up system there. One piece of information he knew about Awakeners was that they could level up in the Land of Origin. This was why Awakeners grew stronger more quickly, and the Land of Origin was often said to resemble a game. So this begged the question: since he could level up, why bother cultivating? Though there were rumors that cultivation could grant someone a second class, none of the teachers in school dared to confirm it. Thankfully, there was a note in the file that soon cleared up Michael's confusion. So that's what it is. After reading the note in the file, Michael realized that just because Awakeners could level up, which in turn made them stronger, didn't mean that cultivating was useless to them. What happens when one can't level up in the short term and still wants to grow stronger? Cultivation could help fill that gap. It turned out that, aside from leveling up, Awakeners could actively enhance their strength through other means. The two techniques sent by the Supers Association belonged to the Knight Cultivation System and the Mage Cultivation System, respectively. Michael was more familiar with the former than the latter. It was said that the cultivation systems and methods originated from the Land of Origin. For the Knight Cultivation System, one had to push their human body to its theoretical limit and light up a life seed within them to step onto the path of the supernatural. But this was no easy task. The theoretical limit of a human body was twice the strength and capabilities of an average human. Even good athletes were typically only about half as strong as this threshold. To become a rank 1 knight, a person needed to push their body to twice the capabilities of an average human. This was very difficult to achieve under normal circumstances, but with a breathing technique, one could use it as a catalyst to reach their human limit. After lighting up a life seed, they would gain a new upper limit and could continue to polish their life seed, thereby continually increasing their body's limits and becoming stronger. This method was primarily for ordinary humans, but Awakeners could also use breathing techniques to enhance their physical strength. The difference, however, was that they couldn't light up a life seed since, as Awakeners, they no longer had limits. However, the note in the file revealed something that surprised Michael: the existence of dual classes. According to the note, if one could light up a life seed before they awakened, as long as there was no conflict with the class they eventually awakened into and it wasn't the same, there was a high chance of acquiring a secondary class. This potential applied specifically to the Knight Cultivation System, which could awaken a secondary class, the Knight class. Michael didn't know much about the Mage system, and the note didn't elaborate on it. No wonder the principal and teachers kept mentioning that after registering with the Supers Association, we'd eventually learn what we needed to know. And this isn't even the only email I received. There's still that mysterious supernatural platform. Michael suddenly felt enlightened. Things that had been unclear to him before now made much more sense. The note that came with the techniques was really helpful. Unfortunately, he hadn't managed to become a knight before awakening, so he missed out on the chance for a dual class. Is this why the principal specifically told Brian to stay back? I don't know much about dual classes, but if one class can make someone stronger, it makes sense that having two would be even better. If that's the case, then Brian is indeed special. Even among Awakeners. Michael didn't feel envious of this, though. He wasn't in competition with anyone. He was already happy just to have been fortunate enough to awaken. Michael continued to read through the note, and once he finished, he closed it. There was no need to rush into cultivation, he still had something else to do. Feeling excited, Michael turned to the other email sent by the Supers Association. This email contained a link which, according to the lady who attended to him at the Supers Association, was his access to a platform made for all registered supernatural beings within the Federation. Without hesitation, Michael tapped the link, which led him to a browser page with a simple design. Share to your friends. Chapter 8. 8 Information about Awakeners and the Land of Origin 2. The page was simple, with a white background, the Supers Association's logo, and 2 empty bars for inputting an email and password. There wasn't anything particularly interesting to observe on this page, so Michael quickly entered his email and password according to the instructions given by the lady at the Supers Association. He felt a sense of anticipation. After all, this was a platform exclusively for supernatural beings, something he never could have imagined accessing in both his lives. Somehow, it feels like I've been invited into a secret organization. After inputting his details, Michael signed in. Soon, he was taken to a new page. Unlike the somewhat bland appearance of the login page, this one was more vibrant and lively. It looked like a forum. A lot seemed to be happening, but unfortunately, there wasn't any instruction manual. Not that one was needed. At first glance, the Supers Association forum didn't seem too different from a regular forum, aside from its content. Does anyone know the weakness of a swamp wyvern? Oi! Seems like we have a big shot in the house. FR. If I recall correctly, wyverns are usually above level 30, right? That's a teenage wyvern, not exactly strong. It's the nonchalance of subtly calling a wyvern weak for me. Newbie cultivator here. How strong is a wyvern for us cultivators? A level 30 should be a commander rank beast for you guys, so yeah, you'll need a knight commander or mage commander to take on a wyvern. Dude, just say a rank 3 cultivator. It's not my fault, brother. Awakeners and cultivators' power systems can be confusing at times. That was the kind of content in the forum. Michael could only read in awe, unable to fully grasp most of it. Once again, the Supers Association delivered essential information right to his fingertips. Not in the form of step-by-step guidance, but through an interactive platform. Since it was a forum, Michael could search for whatever information he needed or ask directly, which he did without hesitation. Though some of the posts on the homepage had intriguing titles, Michael stayed focused. Reading random posts wouldn't help him. He couldn't even understand much of what they discussed yet. Michael dove into a spree of information seeking, and the gaps in his understanding slowly began to fill. By the time he was done, it had already grown dark outside, but he hardly noticed. Reading through various posts on the forum had opened Michael's eyes wide. What shocked him most was the sheer power hidden within this world. We've always heard about cultivators and awakeners, but aside from a few basics about cultivators, like life seeds and the ranks that follow, everything else is shrouded in mystery. Information about awakeners is even more elusive. Michael felt a mix of shock, enlightenment, and excitement. It's my fault for underestimating the people of this world. In fact, it wasn't just Michael who had these misconceptions. Even the original citizens of this world felt similarly. After all, it had only been a little over 200 years since Aurora first came into contact with mana. How advanced could their civilization have become in such a short time? However, they were all wrong, very wrong. The truly powerful beings of this world were astonishingly strong. For example, Michael finally learned more about the power system of cultivators. There were 7 ranks in total, from rank 1 to 7, known respectively as Apprentice, Elite, Commander, Master, King, Emperor, and Demigod. Yes, Demigod. At first, Michael thought he had misread, but after checking 3 times and even watching a video of a demigod effortlessly defeating a 100-meter tall monster with a casual slap, he was left speechless. He didn't know exactly how strong that monster was, but he was certain that a mere sneeze from it would have been enough to end his life. Even if such powerful beings were rare, they should not be few. If they were, the Federation and the Supers Association would likely have kept information about them under tight wraps. The Supers Association forum truly expanded Michael's perspective, and he found himself exhilarated by what he had learned. Power, power. I must have it. If before, Becoming an awakener was mainly about improving his and his family's life, with living a fulfilling life as a secondary goal. Now Michael's heart burned with a fierce desire for power. It took a while for Michael to calm down from the surge of excitement. He had also learned a lot about awakeners, particularly regarding the mysterious Land of Origin. The Land of Origin was a mystical realm that only awakeners could access. It was said to resemble a game world, complete with levels, quests, and more. But one should never mistake it for a game, or they would come to regret it deeply. What linked the Land of Origin to an awakener was the Mark of Origin. Michael glanced down at the back of his right hand, where a flower-like tattoo lay. This hadn't been there before. Michael had never gotten a tattoo. It only appeared after his awakening, this mysterious tattoo, following him ever since. The mark would only show if he wanted it to. Name: Michael Norman. Race: human. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 1. EXP 0/100. Strength 1.3. Agility 1.4. Constitution 1.2. Intelligence 4.5. Attribute points 0. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class skill: Contract slot 0 halves. Gift: Mark of Origin. The Mark of Origin had two primary functions. First, it served as a key to connect an awakener's consciousness with the Land of Origin. Second, it acted as a miniature spatial space. Yes, like a spatial storage ring. Michael had already checked off one of the must-haves on any transmigrator's list with this discovery. However, Michael was curious about what a gift meant, as his Mark of Origin was labeled as one. Yet, he couldn't find any information about it in the forum. This seemed implausible. Surely, all the Awakeners in the Supers Association would be interested in this topic. So, there could only be one explanation. The information was restricted. It likely meant he wasn't yet authorized to access such knowledge. Michael felt he was on the right track with his guess, especially since, right next to the profile they created for him, Level 1 member was clearly displayed in bold. This only made Michael more curious about what a gift was. If information about demigods could be accessed by a Level 1 member like him, even if it wasn't particularly in-depth, then the fact that details about gifts were hidden suggested that this subject was considered more important than even a demigod. Perhaps it held the same weight as matters concerning a god. Though the forum didn't have any direct mentions of gods, Michael couldn't help but suspect that they might exist in this world. It was only after exploring the forum that he realized just how deep the mysteries of this world ran. Fortunately, he could still investigate other information about the panel in his head, turning his attention to the next most intriguing aspect: his talent. According to what he found on the forum, talents could be seen as innate skills that could be used without the need for mana. They were akin to high-level skills, except that they were rare even among awakeners. There were two ways awakeners could obtain a talent. One was through pure luck during the awakening ceremony, and the other was by seizing certain opportunities in the Land of Origin. It was clear that something extraordinary had landed in Michael's lap. However, he felt that his talent was a bit peculiar. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points: 1, 16 hours, 9 minutes, 23 seconds. Aside from the fact that something called evolution points would appear and accumulate every 24 hours, this talent seemed to be currently useless. Despite this, Michael was still pleased to have a talent. Even though he didn't understand its use yet, he was confident it would prove valuable in the future. From its name, Infinite Evolution, he held high expectations for what it might become. Author's note: Phew, it's finally time to kick the story into high gear. In the next chapter, we'll be stepping into the mysterious Land of Origin. Please don't forget to support this book. I'd appreciate it immensely. Share to your friends. Chapter 9 Information about Awakeners and the Land of Origin 3. Michael also read a few things about classes and races, and he had something to say to his teacher who had claimed, "There's no discrimination between classes." Bullshit. In reality, There wasn't any outright discrimination against classes from what Michael could see. However, unlike how his teacher had portrayed it, there was indeed a clear division between classes. There are no weak classes, only weak awakeners was a phrase Michael frequently encountered in the forum during his searches. But from what he had just read, it was undeniable that some classes held certain advantages over others. At least the school got one thing right: the classification of classes into combat, support, and lifestyle roles. Now, thanks to the Supers Association forum, Michael also discovered that there were actually 5 types of classes: general class, rare class, special class, hidden class, and unique class. General classes are the most commonly seen classes among awakeners. A large percentage of awakeners possess these classes, which is why they are considered common. These classes are also easily recognizable, as they provide only 2 attribute points per level up. Rare classes are a step above general classes, offering 4 attribute points per level up. These classes can utilize magic or other special abilities. However, a class does not necessarily need to focus on magic to be categorized as rare, like the Berserker class, for example. Special classes are somewhat unique and unconventional, which makes them difficult to categorize strictly as either general or rare. For instance, the Chef class provides 3 attribute points per level up, while a Barb class might only grant 2 attribute points, despite both being special classes. The term special refers more to their unconventional nature and niche focus. These classes can be considered rarer than rare classes, but their unique nature makes them versatile in how they are grouped. Hidden classes are inheritance-type classes that very few people can have simultaneously. Similar to special classes, they are rare, but they have an added layer of exclusivity. Hidden classes cannot be naturally awakened but can only be obtained through special means, which makes them particularly elusive. Unique classes are the rarest of all, with only one person able to possess a particular unique class at any given time. There wasn't much information about unique classes on the forum, but Michael didn't think that was actually the case. He read somewhere that the number of awakeners in Aurora was a bit more than 70,000, and he found it hard to believe that no one had any information about unique classes. If they truly knew nothing, it wouldn't even be recognized as a legitimate class type. Michael believed it wasn't that information about unique classes didn't exist on the forum. Rather, it was that his authority level wasn't high enough to access such information. It seems authority level isn't just for show. I should try my best to raise it, Michael thought with a subtle smile on his face. Even though it felt like his head might explode from all this new information, it was as if a fascinating new world had opened up to him, and he couldn't get enough of it. These worlds are truly interesting with a lot to offer. Something else that surprised Michael was that even one's race could influence the benefits they received when leveling up. This revelation opened another world to Michael. From what he read, each level up as a human race granted 0.2 in all stats, 0.5 in intelligence, and 2 attribute points. Michael wasn't sure if this was low or not, but it seemed significant. Since they say the land of origin is like a game world, I wonder if it's possible to change races, Michael mused. Out of curiosity, he tried searching for information on the possibility in the forum, but like in the cases of gifts and unique classes, he found nothing. As before, this either meant the information didn't exist or his authority level wasn't high enough. Michael, already used to this, decided to move on. He also read about his class, the Necromancer, which, pleasantly surprising, turned out to be a rare class. Races weren't the only things that provided benefits as one leveled up. Classes did too. Aside from the attribute points they provided based on their grade, certain stats would be boosted depending on the class's specialty. The Necromancer class, for instance, granted 0.1 points to strength and constitution, 0.3 in agility, and 0.5 in intelligence, along with 4 attribute points. Necromancers are basically paper defenses. A punch from a similar level warrior class could probably take out more than half my health, Michael thought immediately. He also began to understand why people in the forum kept emphasizing that power ultimately depended on the awakener themselves. Classes, race, cultivation, resources that could raise stats themselves, and attribute points. If one utilized these things wisely, even an awakener with a Tailor class could become deadly. The more Michael read, the more excited he became about the future. He couldn't wait to enter the land of origin. but he knew he couldn't rush in without making proper preparations. Yes, preparations. As an awakener, he was naturally bound to enter the land of origin, but according to the forum, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows there, especially for new awakeners. In a Tips for Newbies forum post, which was even starred by the Supers Association, Michael learned that when an awakener entered the land of origin for the first time, their initial location was random. It could be near an active volcano, a frozen wasteland, or even in a monster's nest. However, there was a balance. According to the post, it would be something a new awakener should be able to handle theoretically, and Michael didn't like the sound of that, hence his need to prepare. Even the experienced commenters in the post emphasized the importance of preparation. Thanks to the post, Michael also understood why the Supers Association provided such generous funds. It was indeed meant for resources. In the Supers Association platform, aside from the main forum, there was also a store section. Michael saw a myriad of goods there that left him in awe. Refined iron dagger. Price: $230. Refined iron spear. Price: $285. Health potion. Price: $500. Leather pants. Leather shoes. Leather upper body armor. Michael searched for items recommended for newbies and picked the ones he liked. The store had two delivery methods: picking up at the Supers Association or opting for home delivery. Michael decisively chose the latter. If he could avoid leaving home, why should he move? Plus, compared to the total cost of the items he bought, the delivery fee was cheaper. Including the delivery fee, Michael spent a total of $4,328. Just like that, a third of the $15,000 the Supers Association had given him was gone. The Supers Association is really scummy. Michael pouted in pain as he connected his account to the Supers Association platform and watched his money disappear. Michael did not regret buying the items, though. Even though death in the land of origin wasn't real death, if he could prevent it, why shouldn't he? The penalty for dying was harsh, losing 10% of all stats permanently for each death. The dead awakener would also be unable to re-enter the land of origin for a while. Perhaps this penalty wouldn't be as severe for new awakeners, but it was a big deal for the real powerhouses. Imagine having 100 points in all stats and watching 10 permanently disappear. It was a pretty harsh punishment for the top-tier awakeners. After all, the stronger one was, the harder it was to increase a stat. It wasn't just numbers at that point. A 1-point stat increase for a level 100 awakener could very well be the equivalent of 10 points for Michael. After placing his order, the Supers Association platform confirmed that his items would be delivered before noon the next day, which Michael was quite satisfied with. It's not too late to enter the land of origin tomorrow anyway. It's even better. I'm too exhausted to do anything now. Michael was also very hungry. He had learned a lot of information, which significantly filled the gaps in his understanding. Anything else he needed to know could be searched for slowly in the future. For now, Michael just wanted to sleep and wait for the new day to arrive before entering the land of origin. He was excited, but he had his priorities straight. Michael put aside his phone and was just about to carry the plate he'd used earlier when a knock came at his door. "Come in," he said reflexively. When he saw who was on the other side, he was surprised. "Aunt?" Yes, it was indeed Aunt Mia. Michael had been so engrossed in the Supers Association forum that he hadn't noticed anyone entering the house. "Seems like our new awakener has been busy," Aunt Mia teased as she made her way to Michael's bed and made herself comfortable. "Aunt Mia?" Michael said, a little embarrassed by the title, but a happy smile bloomed on his face. He could see a smile on Aunt Mia's face, too, one that was threatening to widen, and hidden within, he could also see that she was proud of him. One must know that both Michaels, from Earth and Aurora, had only experienced true parental love from one person, and that was Aunt Mia. Both had become orphans at a very young age, and Aunt Mia was a mother figure to them, especially to the Michael originally from this world. Though Aunt Mia had a short stature, her blue eyes held the gaze of a mother looking at her child. Michael greeted her respectfully, and he was happy that she was happy. Before he could speak, Aunt Mia beat him to it. "Lily told me about your little adventure today." Michael silently clicked his tongue in annoyance. Perhaps he shouldn't have told Lily anything at all. Now the news he should have delivered himself had come through someone else. But, since it was all family, it didn't really matter. The amount of money the association gave you is really big. But be careful with it, Michael, Aunt Mia said anxiously. In her eyes, Michael was still a young boy. She had no interest in his money, but she was worried about his spending habits. Though Michael's past record of handling money reassured her, this time the amount was so much larger, and she couldn't help but worry that he might waste it. And don't mind your silly cousin. There's no need. Aunt Mia, Michael called out, his tone serious, cutting her off before she could continue. He already knew what she wanted to say, but he didn't want to hear it. His family was his motivation, his drive. Now that he could finally provide for them, how could she refuse? Michael felt dissatisfied. Aunt Mia, the money the association gave me, well, a big chunk of it is for my well-being, so you don't have to worry about anything. As he spoke, Michael had already pulled out his phone, ready to transfer a portion of the funds to her. Michael! Aunt Mia exclaimed anxiously. She didn't entirely believe his words and feared he was going to inconvenience himself for her. In fact, she was right. But did Michael care? No, he didn't. This was likely a stupid decision, but for once, at least one, Michael wanted to satisfy his selfish desire. And also, if he ended up broke, he could wait for more funds to come in next month, all the while working hard in other areas. Michael wasn't afraid of hard work. Ironically, hard work was what had killed the Michael in this world. The hopeful fool had seen a rumor online that if one trained hard enough to come close to becoming a knight, the chance of awakening would be higher. The original Michael knew this was nonsense, but feeling unlucky and with many responsibilities on his shoulders, he pushed himself too hard. In the end, he died, allowing Michael from Earth to take his place. It's okay, Aunt Mia. You don't know this, but the Supers Association is still going to give me more resources soon, Michael said, lying with a straight face. It was, of course, impossible. The association wasn't going to do more for him. They weren't his family, and even some families couldn't always provide that much. Are you lying to me? Aunt Mia asked, a little uncertain. You know I'd never lie to you, Aunt Mia, he said, delivering another lie with an innocent face. This time he felt a slight pang of guilt but didn't let it show. Aunt Mia looked conflicted, her expression reflecting her mixed feelings. Michael noticed her hesitation and knew he had to strike while the iron was hot. Also, since becoming an awakener, I can feel my appetite slowly increasing. We'll need more food at home, Aunt Mia. Michael spoke with a feigned look of seriousness, but just in time. His stomach rumbled, adding authenticity to his words. This convinced Aunt Mia a little. What made her trust his words even more was his status as an awakener. As an awakener, he should be valued by the Federation, right? She thought. Like most adults, she knew of the Federation's admiration for awakeners, though she didn't know that while they valued awakeners, they weren't exactly looking to pamper them. Finally, Aunt Mia chose to believe Michael. Okay, she agreed. Happy, Michael immediately transferred some money to her. Feel free to use it as you like, Aunt Mia. And please, get a few things that Lily enjoys too, he added with confidence. Like a rich man. Just then, Aunt Mia's phone buzzed, showing a bank notification of a $5,000 credit. Aunt Mia was speechless and was about to scold Michael when he spoke again. Trust me, Aunt Mia, this money is nothing to me now. Didn't Lily mention that I'll be getting money every month? Aunt Mia nodded reluctantly. If he was telling the truth, her little Michael could indeed afford to spend money like this. However, she decided that, while she'd use some of the money for the family's well-being, she'd save the rest until she could confirm his words. Seeing that he'd successfully convinced his aunt, Michael secretly sighed in relief as a smile appeared on his face. You're hungry, right? I brought some cake and snacks on my way back. Want some? Aunt Mia asked, remembering the thunder that had erupted from his stomach earlier. Yes, I'd love some, Aunt Mia. After confirming, Aunt Mia took the plate Michael had planned to carry out earlier and left the room, returning shortly with some snacks. They shared a few more words before Aunt Mia left, and Michael's room finally fell quiet. Soon, the soft sound of his snores filled the room. Michael slept with a smile on his face that night. Today had been the best day of his life, even if it was just as stressful. Share to your friends. Chapter 10:10 Preparations. The next morning, Michael woke up feeling refreshed. Although his mind felt clearer after his awakening, the mental exhaustion wasn't so easy to shake off. Fortunately, a good night's sleep was the perfect remedy. Michael didn't immediately get up from his bed, but sat on the edge, reminiscing about the events of the previous day. It's amazing how quickly life can change, Michael thought happily. He couldn't have asked for a better turn of events. And the best part was still yet to come. Today's the day I enter the land of origin. I wonder what I'll encounter. Michael's excitement grew as he thought about the new day ahead. After shaking off the lingering drowsiness from waking up, Michael stood up and opened the shades of his windows, letting the morning light flood into his room. It's quite bright. What time is it now? He walked over to his desk, picked up his phone, and saw that it was just past 8 in the morning. He really had gotten a good night's sleep. Aunt Mia should have gone to work by now. Lily should also be in school. With that thought, Michael left his room to check if anyone else was still in the house. But as he had expected, it was empty except for him. Although it was still a while until noon when his delivery from the Supers Association was due to arrive, Michael decided to freshen up and wait. After all, the delivery was supposed to arrive before noon, which meant there was a chance it could come earlier. And he didn't want to leave the apartment without bathing. Besides, once he received his order, he planned to enter the land of origin immediately. He really couldn't wait any longer. Since he had some time, Michael decided to clean up the house. My classmates would probably never believe that even an awakener still has to clean, Michael mused. Awakeners were like celebrities here, even though little was known about them except for a few clips of them in action. Just like celebrities back on Earth, there were some overzealous fans who probably couldn't imagine their favorite person doing something as mundane as using the toilet. As a few mischievous thoughts crossed his mind, a smile appeared on Michael's face as he happily cleaned up whatever he could around the house. After finishing his chores, Michael brushed his teeth, took a bath and got dressed. Since the delivery still hadn't arrived, he served himself some leftover rice from the previous day and browsed the Supers Association forum on his phone while eating. Never in either of Michael's lives had he been so interested in studying. It was understandable though, while the information was important and somewhat complicated, it felt like it had been pulled straight out of a fantasy novel, making it far more immersive than academic subjects. Time passed like this, and a little past 11 in the morning, Michael received a phone call from an unknown number. Curious and a bit wary, Michael picked up the call. "Is this Mr. Norman?" A voice came through the phone. Hearing the question, Michael immediately guessed who was on the other end. "Yes, I am," Michael replied as he stood up. "That's great. Mr. Norman, I'm here with your delivery. I'm currently in front of your apartment building, but I don't know which floor you live on. Don't worry, I'll meet you there. Please wait for me," Michael said, already stepping outside his apartment and closing the door behind him. Perhaps because the apartment building was old, or maybe because the owner was too cheap, there was no elevator. Residents had to use the stairs to reach their floors. It was probably for the best, since if there was an elevator, the rent would likely be higher, and many residents wouldn't be able to afford living here. Luckily, Michael's apartment was on the second floor, so it didn't take long for him to meet up with the delivery man who had brought his goods from the Supers Association. When Michael saw the appearance of the delivery man, he was a little taken aback. The man seemed to be in his late 30s and had a huge physique, but that wasn't what caught Michael's attention. What drew his eye was the mechanical limb the man had in place of his right hand. This world was advanced enough that losing a limb wasn't considered a serious issue anymore. One could easily get a mechanical replacement that functioned almost like the real thing, except for lacking a sense of touch and, of course, being expensive. However, most people with mechanical limbs also purchased artificial skin to cover them, which was both realistic and far cheaper than the limb itself. There were generally only two types of people who went without artificial skin on their mechanical limbs: those who couldn't afford it and those with a particular sense of style. Seeing as the delivery man wore clothing that deliberately exposed his mechanical arm, he was probably the latter. However, Michael couldn't deny that the man looked quite cool with the exposed mechanical arm, almost heroic even. "Are you Mr. Norman?" the delivery man politely asked as he saw Michael approaching. "Yes, I am. I assume you have my order," Michael replied, nodding in response to the greeting from the delivery man's partner, who was still in the van. After confirming Michael's identity, the delivery man quickly began offloading Michael's order from the van. There were quite a few items, and even with his improved stats from awakening, Michael knew he'd be left sweating after transporting everything to his apartment. Thankfully, the delivery man with the mechanical limb offered to help, which Michael greatly appreciated. Back in the living room of his apartment, Michael stared at the packages on the ground in front of him, feeling a twinge of pain. $4,000. $4,000. Every time he repeated it, it felt like a knife stabbing into his heart, even as his hands eagerly opened the boxes. Michael hadn't gone overboard just because he had some money in his account when he ordered from the Supers Association store. He had simply followed the recommended list of items for entering the land of origin for the first time and selected those he liked. Half an hour later, Michael had opened all his deliveries and placed their contents into the storage space within his mark of origin. New awakeners usually didn't have large spatial spaces in their marks, but it was more than enough for Michael's current needs. He didn't change into any of the leather armor he bought or equip himself with any weapons because, according to the forum, nothing on the Awakener follows them into the land of origin. Only items stored in the mark of origin could be brought in, so everything Michael thought he needed was already stored there. Taking several deep breaths, Michael made his way into his room, feeling anticipation, excitement, and a bit of nervousness. According to the forum, connecting one's consciousness with the land of origin meant leaving it behind in the real world, so his body had to be placed in a suitable position before leaving. Michael decided to lie down on his bed. "Let's do this." He concentrated on the mark on his hand, trying to connect his consciousness with the land of origin. Since it was his first time, it wasn't easy, but thankfully the land of origin was an innate part of every awakener. It didn't take long for him to finally succeed. Michael's right hand, which was raised in the real world, slowly fell as his body began to softly snore. Share to your friends. Chapter 11 Land of Origin. New chosen detected. Chosen identity confirmed. You have gained a new skill, Detect. After reading more about the land of origin, Michael often wondered where his initial location would be. Would it be in the middle of a forest, an open plain, or maybe dangerously close to a monster nest? There were endless possibilities, and Michael's imagination ran wild. He hoped that as long as it wasn't anywhere near monsters, he'd be fine. But when Michael opened his eyes, he found himself in a dark room with black brick walls covered in moss. If not for the holes in the roof allowing in some sunlight, the room would have been pitch black. A foul odor filled the air, making Michael gag in disgust. What is this smell? Rotting garbage? Or worse? No, that's not important right now. Where on earth am I? If he hadn't registered with the Supers Association and gained access to information about the land of origin, he might have panicked. However, though Michael knew each Awakener's initial location was random, he wasn't exactly thrilled. The problem wasn't the location itself but the disgusting smell. Though he wanted to leave immediately, Michael resisted the urge to move. His current location wasn't the worst. At least there were no monsters or erupting volcanoes nearby. But he knew it was better to proceed with caution until he learned more about his surroundings. This wasn't just his own hunch. Experienced Awakeners had emphasized caution multiple times in the Tips for New Awakeners forum post. First step, observe your surroundings. Michael turned to inspect the wall beside him. A wall made of old, weathered bricks. Figures, Michael thought sarcastically as he read the description. He wasn't surprised by its sudden appearance, having expected it. This information was thanks to a new skill he had gained. Actually, one that every Awakener received upon entering the land of origin for the first time. Detect. Much like in games, the Detect skill allowed the user to gather information about specific objects they focused on. It was an essential skill for both new and experienced Awakeners alike. However, Detect had its limitations. For one, It couldn't reveal information about living beings significantly stronger than the user. If the target was more than 20 levels above the user, detect simply wouldn't work. Conversely, the skill provided more detailed information when the user's level was significantly higher than that of the target. Detect could also improve over time, providing more details as the user's knowledge grew. Shifting his focus away from the room's wall, Michael took a moment to observe his own body in this world. As expected, nothing from Aurora had followed him, not even his clothes. Thankfully, he wasn't naked. He was dressed in simple clothing similar to what commoners wore in the medieval ages on Earth. Aside from the clothing, there was nothing else of note on him. Now that he had a basic understanding of his surroundings, Michael decided it was time to explore. But before leaving the room, he decided to arm himself, just in case. There was no sign of monsters outside, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Michael had read plenty of stories on the forum about the unfortunate fates of new awakeners, and he had no intention of dying on his first day. The first thing Michael retrieved from his storage space was the leather armor he had bought from the association. While better armor existed, those options were either too expensive or impractical for him at this stage. Enduring the urge to gag from the foul smell around him, Michael quickly but quietly donned his leather armor. Time to arm myself. Michael had purchased 3 types of weapons from the association, 2 melee weapons and 1 firearm. He had been surprised he could get the latter without any complications. Apparently, his status as an awakener was all the license he needed. Guns were effective in the land of origin, so he decided to bring one along. Compared to the spear and dagger he'd purchased, he felt much safer with a firearm. Though he'd never held a gun in either of his lives, let alone fired one, it offered a few clear advantages over melee weapons. For one, he could attack from a distance, and even if he missed, he could fire additional shots quickly. Of course, guns also had their drawbacks. For instance, the noise could attract unwanted attention, like nearby monsters. Michael had considered this and even read about it on the forum, so he also bought a silencer for his gun. Guns are one of the best tools to have in the early stages, but they quickly become obsolete as one grows stronger. Like the experienced awakeners in the forum said, personal strength is still the most important thing here. After loading his gun and removing the safety, he relaxed his tense shoulders and made his way out of the dark room. Even if his first impression of the land of origin wasn't what he had expected, Michael's excitement about this new world remained undiminished. Share to your friends. Chapter 12 Reality different from Expect Ion. Besides civilizations like Aurora, which are connected to the land of origin through awakeners, there are also native civilizations. This building seems to be a remnant of the past, now abandoned, Michael observed. After leaving the dark room where he first appeared, he found himself in a wide corridor that was dimly lit, saved only by holes in the distant ceiling. If the roof weren't so far out of reach, he would have tried breaking out rather than wandering around as he was now. Thanks to the ventilation provided by the holes in the ceiling, Michael's movements did not cause an echo. As he moved further, Michael also identified the source of the foul odor filling the air. Slimes. These magical creatures looked like harmless, solidified liquid, but they were far from it, secreting acid with a stench just as terrible. Slimes moved by crawling and could hop to attack. The foul smell he'd encountered came from a slime trail left outside the room he'd started in. Michael wasn't sure if the same slime was nearby, but after a while of exploring this vast, seemingly empty building, he encountered one. Acid Slime LV. 4. Rank: Common. A harmless-looking slime that shoots acid. Devious enough, he thought. Slimes happened to be one of the creatures Michael had read about in a forum post titled Common Monsters in the Land of Origin while waiting for his delivery. Interestingly, the post's author was the same person behind Tips for New Awakeners, a Level 5 member of the Supers Association. Michael wasn't sure what being a Level 5 member meant, but he thought it sounded impressive. In Common Monsters in the Land of Origin, creatures like slimes and goblins were described with pictures attached, so even before using Detect on the acid slime, Michael already knew what it was. What he hadn't expected was for something like the acid slime to exist. It looked vastly different from the cute, blue slime he'd seen in the post, but since the Awakener had mentioned there were many slime variants, he wasn't too surprised in the end. A 2-star common rank monster. Guess that says a lot about its freakish nature. Michael didn't know if it was the acid slime's slightly grotesque appearance, the terrible stench, or its ability to shoot acid that bothered him most. In the land of origin, there were 7 known ranks for monsters, from low to high: common, rare, extraordinary, epic, legendary, mythical, and demigod. Each rank had 3 mini-grades called stars, like 1-star common, 2-star common, 2-star rare, and so on. Both monsters and items followed this ranking system. For items, the stars indicated efficiency and quality, while for monsters, they represented potential. Every star in a monster's rank allowed up to 7 levels, so a 2-star common rank acid slime, like the one in front of Michael, could potentially reach level 14. A rank 1 level 4 slime that shoots acid. Sure enough, this slime is too freakish. Whatever happened to being just cute? Huh. Though Michael's thoughts seemed scattered, he was actually weighing whether to confront the acid slime or retreat. Although the slime was over 3 levels above him, slimes were considered some of the weakest monsters, making them relatively easy to kill if one prepared well. Michael hadn't forgotten his main goal, shared by all Awakeners entering the land of origin, to get stronger, and the quickest way to do that was leveling up. And as a Necromancer, he'd eventually need undead summons, so he would have to kill something, or he'd be a fake Necromancer at the end of the day. Leveling up allowed for custom stat allocation, which meant Michael could technically build himself like a warrior, but ignoring his class's strengths would make him mediocre. There was no reset button for Awakeners who carelessly wasted their potential. Too bad slimes don't leave a body behind, or I could have finally used my class skills to revive something. Of course, he wasn't entirely serious. Even if the slime did leave a body, he wouldn't be eager to contract such a smelly creature unless he was desperate. In a way, encountering a slime first wasn't bad news. Any other monster might have been a significant challenge, while slimes, especially acid slimes, were known for their slow movement. Still, he couldn't let his guard down. A leather armor alone wouldn't be enough to protect him from an acid shot. After a moment's thought, Michael finally decided to see if he could turn this acid slime into experience points, or end up as its food. Let's do this. Suppressing the urge to take a deep breath to steady his nerves, he rushed out from his hiding spot and began firing at the football-sized green monster about 10 meters away. Tui, bang, tui, bang, tui, bang. 3 shots and he missed everyone. The acid slime finally seemed to notice him, turning to look at him, vibrating in a way that seemed almost angry, or so Michael thought. He hadn't expected his aim to be this poor, even at a distance of 10 meters. Sure, the slime's small size made it a tricky target, but why were his bullets missing entirely? Michael wanted to blame the recoil, but his enhanced Awakener body made that excuse weak. My aim is truly terrible, he thought, frowning. He readied himself to shoot again, but before he could, the slime fired a jet of acid straight at him. Shit! Michael dodged hurriedly, but a drop of acid managed to hit his unarmored arm. Ah! He stifled a scream as a burning pain shot through him. In that moment, he realized he'd heavily underestimated the acid slime. But there was no time to dwell on the pain. The slime launched another acid shot, which Michael dodged successfully this time, but his confidence was wavering. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he struggled to ignore the searing pain in his arm. His left hand now useless as he aimed with just his right. The second attack had finally angered him. Accuracy be damned, he started shooting wildly in the slime's direction. Tui, bang, tui, bang, tui, tui, tui. Most shots missed, but his burst of frustration began to inflict some damage, even if only a little. Soon, all 30 bullets in Michael's gun were exhausted. As he fled from the acid slime, now slightly smaller but still hopping after him, he followed the marks he'd made with his dagger on several walls to avoid getting lost in the vast, abandoned building. He tried to reload, but the pain in his left arm made it difficult, causing him to drop several clips. The worst part was that the slime's hopping speed was only slightly slower than his own, keeping him within its attack range. Though his leather armor protected his back and legs, he could still feel the heat closing in. After several failed attempts, Michael finally managed to reload and resumed a frantic shooting spree at the slime. This process repeated a few more times until, with a lucky shot, he damaged the core inside the slime, finally killing it. You killed a common LV4 acid slime. You've gained 45 experience points. You killed a monster 3 levels higher than your own, earning a 4x experience multiplier. You've gained 180 experience points. Level up. You have leveled up to level 2. You have learned the skill Basic Shot. On his first day in the land of origin, Michael had almost been taken down by one of the weakest monsters, a slime. Share to your friends. Chapter 1313 First Kill. You've leveled up to level 2 human. You've gained 0.2 stat points in strength, agility, and constitution. You've gained 0.5 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 2 attribute points. You've leveled up to level 2 Necromancer Apprentice. You've gained 0.1 stat points in strength and constitution, 0.3 stat points in agility, and 0.5 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 4 attribute points. Michael hardly registered the notifications. It felt like he was about to die, his whole body burning as if it were engulfed in flames. A section of his left arm looked mutilated, horrifying to even glance at. Suppressing the urge to scream, Michael took out one of the health potions he'd bought from the Supers Association store. He hadn't imagined he'd need it less than 2 hours after first stepping into the land of origin. Despite the warnings about not treating the land of origin like a game, part of him still had. It fueled his excitement, filling him with visions of leveling up like the protagonist in some cheap novel, rising to the peak of this world and beyond. Perhaps it was his teenage optimism that kept him hopeful, or maybe he was unconsciously slipping into the role of an 18-year-old despite already being an adult back on Earth. With shaky hands, Michael poured half of the health potion over his injured arm and drank the rest. Gradually, the pain began to fade. The potion worked like magic, and Michael watched in awe as new flesh formed over his wounds. A scar remained, likely due to the potion's grade, but he didn't care. As long as the terrible pain was gone, he could deal with the rest later. I almost died, Michael thought. Death in the land of origin wasn't permanent, but he'd undeniably come close, against one of the weakest monsters here, no less. I'm pathetic, too naive, too inexperienced, too reckless. If I just kept my distance from that acid slime, I wouldn't be in this mess. What Michael didn't realize was that his performance, while far from perfect, would have impressed most veteran awakeners. He had not only succeeded in killing a monster on his first encounter, but had also taken down an opponent several levels higher than him. Despite being just a slime, it was still superior to him. Michael also misunderstood that, though slimes were among the weakest monsters in the land of origin, that reputation applied only from a certain perspective. The writer of the post calling slimes weak was already a powerful being qualified to look down on slimes. For many, especially new awakeners, slimes were no joke, and underestimating them had been Michael's first mistake. Both the Michael from Earth and the one from Aurora shared a tendency to be unrelenting with themselves. Growing up as an orphan had forced him to mature quickly and shoulder responsibilities, leaving him with little patience for his own mistakes. This same trait made him feel little sense of accomplishment at defeating the slime he subconsciously disdained as weak. After sitting in silence for a long while, Michael's messy emotions finally calmed, and he began to focus on other things. This scar won't follow me to the real world, right? Michael glanced uncertainly at the ugly scar on his left arm. Something remarkable about the bodies of awakeners in the land of origin was how closely they mirrored those in the real world. They could be considered perfect clones, in sync with their counterparts. This replication was so complete that even pain was experienced just as intensely here as in reality. Recalling his recent encounter with the acid slime sent a shiver down Michael's spine. I hope I don't develop PTSD over slimes. That would be too pathetic. After examining the scar a bit longer, Michael decided it was unlikely to follow him back to reality. The primary function of this body was to synchronize any strength he gained here with his real body. However, it seemed he'd have to bear the scar here until he died. According to posts on the Supers Association forum, an awakener's body in the land of origin functioned much like a real one, independent from the original, requiring food and other sustenance. It wasn't just data like in a game. This was also why death here only counted if the entire body or major organs were destroyed. Losing a limb wouldn't kill him, but it would leave him crippled in this world. To regain a fully functional body, his current one would have to be destroyed so a new one could reconstruct the next time his consciousness entered the land of origin. To put it simply, one could reconstruct a body they didn't like by killing themselves. However, aside from the fact that many were not sick enough to consider this, even seasoned awakeners would rather be crippled than end their own lives. This was because death in this world, while not permanent, still resulted in a 10% permanent reduction in all stats. Not many could afford that loss. So, even though death wasn't truly final here, most awakeners took their lives seriously. By now, Michael had recovered from his life and death battle with the acid slime and could finally focus on something he'd been putting off. I leveled up. Though his performance against the acid slime left much to be desired, Michael wouldn't turn down the experience points. He had a problem with the slime, not with its generous experience reward. Status. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level: 2, 1 carat. EXP: 80/250. Strength: 1.6, 0.3 carat. Agility: 1.9, 0.5 carat. Constitution: 1.4, 0.3 carat. Intelligence: 5.5, 1.0 carat. Attribute points: 6. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/4. Gift: Mark of Origin. Compared to how it looked when he first awakened, Michael's status screen now appeared significantly different. The first thing he noticed wasn't the change in his level or stats but his skills section. Aside from the 2 class skills he'd had since awakening, entering the land of origin had granted him 2 more, which stood out. Michael already knew the function of his first 3 skills. Undead Summoning, a primary skill that allowed him to summon and dismiss undead at will. Undead Revival, his true core skill, enabling him to create undead summons in the first place. And Detect, a basic scouting skill used for gathering information. Now, there was a new addition. Basic Shot, Basic Mastery, Proficiency. 0.6%. Fires a single, accurate shot at the target with standard damage. Seems like something that belongs to the archer class, Michael thought. Michael was, in fact, correct. Basic Shot wasn't just any ordinary skill for the archer class. It was one of its core skills, akin to how Undead Revival was for him. But since this was an archer class skill, how and why could Michael learn it? Class skills were called class skills, not because only one class could learn them, but because specific classes could maximize their potential. For example, Undead Revival was a skill other classes could technically learn, but non-necromancers couldn't make full use of it. Even if another awakener learned Undead Revival and Undead Summoning, the number of undead summons they could control would be limited, unlike necromancers like Michael, who unlocked extra slots with each level up. Interestingly, contract slots were also used to gauge talent for classes like necromancers and beast tamers. Just because 2 individuals awakened the same class didn't mean they were on equal footing, especially when it came to contract slots. For instance, Michael had 2 starting contract slots, gaining 2 more with each level. However, there were rare individuals with 5 starting slots, meaning that by level 10, while Michael would have 20 slots, they would have 50. This was one way classes reliant on contracts were graded. Returning to class skills. Class skills weren't exclusive to specific classes but were optimized by them. When non-necromancer classes learned Undead Revival, they would start at Basic Mastery, and raising proficiency would be challenging. In contrast, necromancers like Michael would start at intermediate mastery for skills like undead revival or any necromancer-centric ability. This applied to other class systems as well. Michael successfully learned basic shot, but his mastery began at basic mastery, whereas archers would automatically start at intermediate mastery for this skill, whether they received it at awakening or learned it later. This skill should make up for my terrible shooting a bit, Michael thought happily. He had no intention of avoiding more monsters just because of his experience with the acid slime. Though he didn't enjoy pain, who would? He wasn't a coward. Shifting his focus away from his new skill, Michael began to examine the changes that had occurred after leveling up. Share to your friends. Chapter 14 New Skill. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level: 2, 1 carat. EXP: 80/250. Strength: 1.6, 0.3 carat. Agility: 1.9, 0.5 carat. Constitution: 1.4, 0.3 carat. Intelligence: 5.5, 1.0 carat. Attribute points: 6. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/4. Gift: Mark of Origin. My stats have increased, was the first thing Michael noticed. He hadn't felt anything earlier, which made sense, as pain had been all-consuming. But after seeing the digital representation of his stat increase, Michael paid attention to his body and finally noticed it. He stood up and tried a few movements to gauge how much his stats had risen. So this is what it means to level up, he thought in awe. Since his awakening, this was only the second time Michael felt his body was different. He figured it would only become more pronounced as he leveled up. Now he was only level 2, but what about when he reached levels like 50? By then, even his less relevant stats for his class like strength and constitution would likely reach superhuman levels. Among his stats, Michael noticed that intelligence had increased the most. However, it was currently useless, as he had no way to use mana yet. The intelligence stat didn't make one smarter. It simply represented an awakener's total mana and their ability to learn things quickly, like spells. Thanks to his human race and necromancer class, which each provided 0.5 stat points in intelligence, Michael now had almost 6 times the average intelligence of a typical human. The stat system for awakeners factored in their race to determine their strengths. Even before awakening, Michael had known races like elves existed in the land of origin, and some of these elves weren't native but from civilizations like Aurora, where awakeners also resided. For example, an elf with a strength stat of 1 would have it scaled according to their natural physique. So, if elves were naturally stronger than humans, a single point increase in their strength stat might equate to what would be 2 points for humans. This system reminded Michael of the class system, where some classes had inherent advantages over others. However, all these differences were meaningless to him now, as he was still lost in the middle of nowhere. The next biggest boost went to his agility stat, with the mage-type necromancer class surprisingly contributing the most points. Agility affect movement speed, reaction time, dodge ability, and attack speed. Michael wondered what a mage class like necromancer would benefit from agility, but he made a note to research it later. After intelligence and agility, strength and constitution received the lowest enhancements. Strength impacted physical power, melee attack damage, carrying capacity, and physical feats. Constitution affected health, endurance, resistance to physical and elemental damage, and environmental factors. Michael knew these stats would have been even lower without the boosts from leveling up as a human. If his stats depended solely on his necromancer class, his mana pool might be vast, but even a lower-level physical class could probably take him down with a single punch. Despite the seemingly small gains, he felt his overall performance had improved by at least 30%. And this is only from one level up. I need more experience. The surge in power was addicting. Despite the ordeal with the slime, Michael had no intention of shying away. Ever since seeing that video of a demigod cultivator in action, he'd vowed to reach a similar level of strength. A single, bad encounter with a slime wasn't going to change that. However, the experience had taught him to be more cautious. If he were to face slimes again, he'd either have to use his brains or suppress them with power. He didn't consider himself dumb, but he wouldn't exactly call himself smart either. After all, an intelligent person wouldn't have just attacked a level 4 monster, regardless of its species, with the desperation of an experience-hungry dog, and he'd been just that. But if he wanted to use power to suppress any slimes he encountered, Michael's gaze drifted to his attribute points on the panel. Maybe, just maybe, they could help him. Attribute points. 6. Share to your friends. Chapter 15, 15 Killing More Slimes. Michael wouldn't claim to know much about his new reality just because he spent a few hours on the Supers Association forum. But thanks to those hours of studying, he could say he knew much more about Awakeners now than before. Aside from a few other things, there was one thing all Awakeners wanted regardless of race. Attribute points, with each point representing the entire power of an average individual of their respective race. An instant boost. And right now, Michael had 6 of these points he could use to instantly strengthen himself. Which stat would maximize these points and help me most right now? Michael wondered. At this moment, he needed something to boost his survivability and strength, and apart from external items, only these attribute points could help. Michael examined his stats, considering which of the 4 would best support him in his current situation. Strength, 1.6. Agility, 1.9. Constitution, 1.4. Intelligence, 5.5. Attribute points, 6. Michael's initial location could be described as odd. At first glance, it didn't seem particularly dangerous, but it also couldn't be called safe. It might be a stretch to label it dangerous because of a single slime, but that slime, a genuine monster, also made this place questionable. What if there were more monsters? And what if they weren't slimes? Michael didn't like slimes, but he felt they were probably the best kind of monster he could currently handle solo. If the acid slime had a stat system, it would likely have allocated 90% of its stats to intelligence, 8% to agility, and the remaining 2% split between strength and constitution, just enough to live. This is rough estimation, but it was obvious that, despite being an acid slime, its constitution was minimal. Even with gun and bullet technology refined over 200 years, it shouldn't have been able to kill the slime by destroying its core embedded within its acidic body. It was only now, as Michael had time to think, that he realized just how incredibly lucky he'd been. If he had encountered any other monster, like a wolf with 90% of its stats in agility, he'd probably be at home right now, cooking something for his cousin. Monsters were supernatural beings, so even a wolf's speed would be terrifying. A normal wolf is already faster than an average human, so a wolf monster would be a nightmare to escape. A slime, in contrast, was manageable. With a long-range weapon, it could be defeated without risking close contact. But without one, getting close enough to kill an acid slime was almost suicidal. Just one wrong step could lead to excruciating pain, a worse deterrent than even the consequences of death. I really hope there's no monster other than slimes in this building, Michael thought. As for hoping for no monsters at all, that wasn't his wish. He was greedy for the experience points. Okay, it's decided. I'll choose agility and constitution. For a necromancer to choose these stats seemed wasteful, but Michael had no choice. Right now, he was a fake necromancer without a single undead summon or spell to cast. Although intelligence was his most important stat, it felt useless at the moment. Ironically, investing in it felt like a waste. As for why he chose agility and constitution, the reasoning was simple. The latter to boost his health and endurance so he could survive longer, and the former so he could run from anything he couldn't defeat or at least stay out of reach. He planned to put more points into agility between the two. I'm really a disgrace to necromancers. After a moment's thought, Michael stopped hesitating and began to increase his stats. He first placed 2 points into Constitution. Constitution, 3.4. After increasing his Constitution by 2 points, Michael immediately felt different. A warm sensation spread through his body, leaving him with a subtle sense of increased health. The change was hard to pinpoint, but the most noticeable effect was on his mutilated left arm. Now, with 3 times the constitution of an average human, the scar there seemed to fade slightly, not disappearing but looking older, as though it had been healing for years. This implied that future scars wouldn't vanish either. Increasing constitution would only make them appear healed. Even though I haven't ascended to rank 1 yet, with 3 times the constitution of an average human, my lifespan should be pretty long, right? Michael wondered. He was uncertain but felt he was on the right track. Awakeners had incredibly long lifespans. Rank 1 Awakeners could live up to 200 years, so what about the higher ranks? Beyond offering great power, the Land of Origin presented another alluring gift: immortality. Michael suspected that for many, immortality was the real prize. Power was just a desirable convenience. After adjusting to his enhanced constitution, Michael then allocated points to his agility stat. Agility, 4.9. Compared to constitution, the effects of increasing agility were immediate. When Michael tried to move his hands, the newfound flexibility and speed made him stumble and almost flip himself over. Amazing! Though in an awkward position, his heart was filled with excitement. Boosting his agility felt like breaking free from invisible chains that had weighed him down. 4 times the average human speed. I'm practically a mini superhuman in the eyes of ordinary people now. And this is just level 2. When I advance to the first rank, the stat increase will be even more impressive. Michael was thrilled with his growth, eager to get even stronger. Now, he didn't fear acid slimes hurting him. He feared not finding any to fight. Before diving into exploring the abandoned building, though, he took a few minutes to adjust to his newfound agility. After testing his movement, he was stunned. The average human speed is about 100 meters in 10 seconds. I just tried running, and I'm hitting around 80 meters per second, and I think it's only this fast because I still need better control of my body. This is just the strength of an unranked awakener at level 2? No wonder only a few cultivators dared challenge the arrogant awakeners in the forums. But more than anything, Michael was overjoyed. He was lucky to have awakened. Like cultivators before truly stepping into the supernatural path, awakeners below rank 1 were also referred to as apprentices, which even showed on their status panel. But considering his current strength, even a new rank 1 knight might not necessarily be as strong as he was now, right? Are cultivators really that weak? No, I can't think like that. Michael quickly scolded himself, sensing a hint of arrogance. That wasn't a good path, lest he become conceited. The waters of this world run deep. I'm not qualified to look down on anything yet. After calming down, Michael also recognized that his distribution of attribute points as a necromancer was clearly off. It was better to excel in one thing than to be mediocre in everything. But the issue was, he didn't have a choice. Right now, strength mattered most for leveling up and, more importantly, survival. As for necromancy, since he'd need to kill a monster first to have an undead summon, he could only hope that, if he did encounter one, it wouldn't be too strong. There's nothing I can do about it now. I'll leave it to fate. First, let's see if the slime dropped anything valuable. Excited, Michael made his way over to the corpse of the acid slime. As for the last attribute point, he decided to keep it in reserve for emergencies. Share to your friends. Chapter 16:16 Increasing Strength. Just like loot in games, the Land of Origin had its own version. The difference was that you couldn't simply touch a monster's corpse, shout loot, and watch materials burst out. While occasionally a monster corpse might burst out some loot, most of the time the corpse itself was the loot, and you had to manually dismantle it to get what you wanted. However, there was one common type of loot that usually appeared from dead monsters. Unranked Spirit Crystal. I actually got a Spirit Crystal on my first kill. So lucky. Michael picked up the transparent crystal, which contained a bright, solidified liquid. Spirit crystals, said to be superior to mana crystals, the advanced version of mana stones, were highly valuable. They were materials that could only be found in abundance in the Land of Origin. Mana stones were cultivation resources that both cultivators and awakeners could use for their growth. A mana stone could increase cultivation speed by up to 3 times. This meant that using a mana stone for 1 month of cultivation was equivalent to 3 months of normal cultivation. The value of a mana stone was clear. Then there was the advanced version, the magic crystal, which could boost cultivation speed by up to 5 times. 5 times the cultivation speed meant that 1 month of cultivating with a mana crystal was equivalent to 5 months of normal cultivation. Given how valuable mana crystals were, just imagine the value of spirit crystals which were placed above them. The two could hardly be compared. A spirit crystal could boost cultivation speed by up to 10 times. 10 times meant that 1 month of cultivation with a spirit crystal was almost a full year of normal cultivation. However, something as valuable as a spirit crystal was rare and in short supply. But what really excited Michael about the appearance of this spirit crystal wasn't because of its cultivation benefits. Like most awakeners, Michael wasn't too focused on the strength brought from cultivation. The real reason he was thrilled about the spirit crystal was its value. For someone like Michael, red-eyed with poverty, the money-making potential of being an awakener was a big motivation. One way he planned to make a profit was by selling loot to the Supers Association. As a common loot dropping from every 3 to 4 kills, or sometimes even less out of every 10 kills, Michael paid close attention after learning of its existence. In the Supers Association store, a mana stone was priced at $1,000, while a mana crystal sold for $5,000 due to its rarity and ease of absorption. Outside the association, these prices were even higher. A spirit crystal, thanks to its rarity and the pure, easily absorbed mana it contained, was valued at a whopping $20,000. $20,000. Though the selling price would differ from the store price, Michael estimated he could still get over $15,000 for it. It was clear why he was so thrilled with this find. To think I'd make my monthly allowance from the Supers Association on my first outing. Truly, being an awakener was a fast track to riches. Michael was pleased, but he grew a bit conflicted upon remembering another use for the spirit crystal. Aside from boosting cultivation speed, mana stones, mana crystals, and spirit crystals could also help recover exhausted mana, though this was often seen as wasteful. However, certain energies, like soul energy, couldn't be replenished by mana stones or crystals. He had seen some posts on the Supers Association forum mentioning souls, but the topic felt distant and complex. Michael figured such topics would be covered in an Awakener Academy, if he ever managed to get into one. Though Michael didn't think much about the topic of souls, he knew soul energy was tied to something he possessed. A talent. Talents were considered an advanced form of spells but were more powerful, as most skills couldn't match their capabilities. Talents didn't require mana to use. Instead, they needed soul energy, a resource no awakener could ever have enough of, making talents a sort of pseudo-trump card. Since soul energy wasn't the same as mana, it couldn't be restored by mana stones or crystals. If an awakener didn't want to wait for soul energy to recover slowly on its own, a spirit crystal could be used to replenish it. This made spirit crystals especially valuable to supernaturals who relied on soul energy, not just awakeners or talent holders. Michael had a talent, which was why he felt conflicted about using the spirit crystal, even though he'd never actually used his talent. Talents were powerful abilities, and though Michael tried not to be bothered by his current inability to access his, he couldn't shake a sense of discomfort. Would I be able to finally use my talent if I absorbed this spirit crystal? Michael was uncertain. This hesitation made him take a while to decide. Michael, look at the bigger picture. Money is good, but strength is better. If I can get one spirit crystal, I can get another. It's better to use this spirit crystal if there's even a chance of using my talent. With more strength, I'll be able to hunt more monsters and earn more spirit crystals. Gritting his teeth, Michael finally chose to absorb the spirit crystal. Author's note: apprentice cultivators can only passively absorb mana through breathing or meditation techniques, with the amount depending on their innate talents. They are unable to actively draw mana from resources like mana stones until they advance to official cultivator status. This limitation makes resources that accelerate cultivation for apprentice cultivators, with little to no side effects, highly valuable. However, mana stones, mana crystals, and spirit crystals are excluded from this category, as apprentice cultivators lack the ability to access the mana contained within them. Also, even after advancing to official cultivator status, apprentice cultivators are still referred to as apprentices, though now in a more formal capacity. Interestingly, those in the pre-advancement stage were originally called trainees, but this term has fallen out of use over time. Share to your friends. Chapter 17:17 Spirit Crystal. After absorbing the Spirit Crystal, Michael didn't feel any immediate changes. It was when he checked his status to see his talent, he was finally able to see one. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points 3. The evolution points increased? Michael's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise. There was still a bit more than an hour left since his awakening yesterday, meaning the daily evolution points would arrive soon, bringing his total to 4. Though I guess it's a good thing that the evolution points are increasing, but why haven't I felt any changes yet? Do these points need to accumulate to a certain level before I can use my talent? Michael speculated. He also had another suspicion about his talent. Maybe my talent is linked to my class for activation. From what I read on the forum, that's a common issue. Perhaps I need an undead summon first before I can use my talent. Michael sighed as he thought about it. He wanted an undead summon too. But unless he encountered another easy monster like the slime in this building, which he didn't think was likely, he couldn't do much. For now, he would just have to go with the flow. Maybe the Supers Association forum has a solution. I'll make sure to research it after I'm done here. Even though he had used the precious spirit crystal and still couldn't use his talent, Michael tried not to feel bad about it. At least he had gained something in return, even if it wasn't usable yet. Shifting his focus away from his talent, Michael turned to the other loot from the acid slime's corpse. It was the slime's core. The core was scattered a bit on the ground, likely from the shot that killed it. I don't know if this is worth anything, but I'll take it just in case. Not willing to throw anything potentially valuable away, Michael gathered the acid slime's core, which was about the size of a ping-pong ball, and placed it into his mark of origin. Afterward, he retraced his steps back to where he first encountered the slime, following the trail it had left behind. Michael did this to gather the bullet casings he had dropped while trying to distance himself from the slime's acid shots. Unfortunately, some bullets had been destroyed by the acid slime during the chase, though a few managed to survive intact. Of course, just because the casings were damaged didn't mean Michael was letting go of the intact bullets inside. Every bullet was worth money, and he wasn't about to be generous and leave them to nature. After gathering all the casings he had dropped, Michael returned to scanning his surroundings. At first I wasn't sure, but after so many turns, I think this place might be a dormitory or at least a place where a large number of people once lived, judging by the large rooms and structure of the building. Michael was still unsure, as he had only explored a small part of the building and couldn't make an accurate guess yet. Let's keep exploring and see if there are any more monsters in this building. Hopefully there'll be slimes, preferably nothing too freakish. It wasn't that Michael was afraid of other types of monsters. His experience told him that slimes were the only creatures he could handle in his current state. Only rabbits could come close. Had he been closer to civilization, he might have even received a quest to hunt such creatures. However, his starting point was far from any village or town, unlike some new awakeners. As for why he felt sure about only being able to handle slimes now was because of his combat prowess. There was a reason guns became useless to awakeners after a while. The forums didn't explain it clearly, only hinting that monster skin grew thicker or that they developed skills making projectiles like bullets ineffective. However, after raising some of his stats, particularly his constitution, Michael started to understand a little. Strength 1.6, Agility 4.9, Constitution 3.4, Intelligence 5.5, Attribute points 1. With nearly 4 times the constitution of an average human, Michael's enhanced constitution affected his health, endurance, and resistance to both physical and elemental damage, as well as environmental factors. He suspected that even a bullet shot at him might not cause serious harm. He might not even bleed due to the increased toughness of his skin. Just as a lighter wouldn't harm an average person, with his constitution now 3 times that of a typical human, Michael had reason to believe he'd be much harder to kill with ordinary weapons. If this was true for him, then what about monsters? Though attribute points gave Awakeners a substantial, almost unfair advantage, just like a cheat, making them stronger than most monsters at the same level, there were still higher-level monsters that demanded caution. Some of these could have a constitution equal to or even greater than his, depending on their species, monster rank, and number of stars. Compared to those stronger monsters, creatures with relatively weak bodies, like acid slimes, were indeed the safer opponents for a newbie like him. Michael didn't dwell on these thoughts for long. Shortly after moving through the large building he suspected had once been a residential area, he encountered his second monster. However, he was conflicted by the sight in front of him. Should I be happy or not? Acid Slime LV. 7. Rank: Common. A harmless-looking slime that shoots acid. Share to your friends. Chapter 18 Suspicions. Just as Michael had hoped, he encountered another monster. It was another slime just as he wished. However, this slime had a higher level than him. While Awakeners shouldn't be judged solely by their level, thanks to attribute points, there's a reason the saying "fight according to your level" exists. Although a level 7 acid slime didn't necessarily mean it would be much harder to kill due to a slime's naturally weak constitution, its acid would likely be more potent than the previous one. However, with my current constitution and speed, could I actually take on this slime head-on? Michael wondered. Monsters didn't have attribute points like Awakeners, so any increase they got as they leveled up was purely based on their race. If Michael relied solely on the stat increases his human race naturally provided, 0.2 in all stats and 0.5 in intelligence per level, he'd only gain 1.8 in strength, agility, and constitution and 4.5 in intelligence by level 10. He'd be stronger than other humans, but nowhere near as powerful as he was now with his attribute points. This was why attribute points felt like cheats. With attribute points, even a level 7 monster shouldn't be too tough for Michael if he planned well. For the acid slime, avoiding its acid shots would lower the danger significantly. Of course, Michael only considered this. Until his gun proved ineffective, he preferred long-range combat with monsters. It wasn't that he lacked close combat skills. By the time students left high school in the real world, most had basic combat training. Due to the combat-oriented nature of Awakener and Cultivator professions they could potentially have in the future. Though he wasn't the top in his class, Michael had learned some close combat skills. But knowing how to fight didn't mean he could automatically apply it well in a real encounter. Michael stared at the acid slime, about 20 meters away and slowly crawling further. If it had been farther, his detect skill wouldn't have worked, as unranked Awakeners could only use it within such a limited range. I wonder if basic shot will be effective at this distance, Michael thought, uncertain. Unlike detect, which was arguably unique, other skills, even class skills, had clear limitations and mastery levels. Detect had its own limitations, but notably, it didn't have a mastery level. Unlike other skills, which started from basic mastery or class skills from intermediate mastery, detect had no mastery rank. One unique feature was that, like a talent, it didn't use mana, yet unlike talents, it also didn't require soul energy. The only valuable information he found in his research was that detect could be considered a passive skill, a rare type that required no mana to activate and functioned constantly. Active skills, in contrast, needed to be manually activated using energy. Yet, despite this classification, detect still didn't quite feel like a typical passive skill. Michael was intrigued by the nature of the detect skill, but when he searched the forums, he found only basic information, with no mention of its unique properties. His first thought was that this was due to his authority level in the Supers Association, which was only level 1. If detect required a higher authority to learn more about, it confirmed its unique nature. Perhaps, he thought, it might even have something to do with the uniqueness of the land of origin itself, rather than just the skill's effects. Other skills, however, were generally more straightforward once one became familiar with them. Most skills didn't mean immediate effect upon activation. Just because an Awakener had the Fireball skill, for instance, didn't mean a fireball would instantly appear upon activation. Instead, activating a skill provided the caster with knowledge and an instinctual feel for its workings, making it easier to use. The higher the skill's mastery, the deeper the knowledge and ease of use. Take Basic Shot, the skill Michael acquired. Activating it wouldn't immediately fire a bullet. Instead, it would instinctively guide him on how to hold the gun, aim, and shoot, an improvement over his earlier, more random attempts. As his mastery improves, the more the skill would feel like second nature to him. Share to your friends. Chapter 19, Clearing the Space. 1. As thoughts raced through Michael's mind, he raised his gun, aiming at the distant acid slime. Michael quietly activated his skill. Basic Shot. Immediately, he felt an instinctive awareness. His grip was wrong, his aim was off, his posture needed adjusting. Step by step, Michael made each correction, guided by the skill's influence, while keeping his focus on the unaware slime in the distance. Despite the skill's assistance, it took Michael about 20 seconds to make these adjustments. He could still sense more room for improvement, a result of his low mastery of Basic Shot. With higher mastery, aiming and shooting would feel like second nature. He'd be faster, more precise without needing to think. The miraculous effect of his skill left Michael speechless. For the first time, handling a gun felt natural. Though the skill hints I could improve even further, this is already leagues beyond my earlier fumbling. All I need is to raise my skill's proficiency and mastery. No wonder the Federation wants awakeners. We really are like cheats, quick power-ups, instantly mastering skills that should take years to learn. As a necromancer, if I were an archer, wouldn't I already be a sharpshooter? How can ordinary people compete with this? Sure, both are powerful, but the teachers were really wrong to say awakeners and cultivators were equal. It's not surprising, though, since the world barely understands these two professions in the first place. Is this a deliberate concealment by the Federation? Or is there a bigger picture here? Despite the whirlwind of thoughts, Michael's focus never wavered from the acid slime. As soon as he locked onto the monster with a steady aim, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A soft sound echoed through the long hall. The gunshot wasn't loud, thanks to the silencer. Pooey! Unlike his first encounter with an acid slime, where he missed every shot, this time Michael's first bullet struck true. It didn't kill the slime, but the hole close to its core showed it was a near hit. Basic Shot is so powerful, Michael praised in his mind as he began to retreat. Though close, the shot hadn't reached the core, and now the slime was aware of him. No eyes or ears, yet it still senses, truly a freak of nature, Michael thought, revealing his dislike for slimes. But it's slow. Even though monsters didn't have attribute points, Michael expected the level 7 acid slime to be stronger. However, aside from the intensity and range of its acid attacks, its speed was barely different from the last one. If it's this slow, then there's nothing to fear. This didn't mean Michael would be reckless. Despite his increasing confidence, Michael knew little about slimes and their potential abilities. However, seeing the slime's slow pace, Michael figured could potentially finish it off with his refined spear from the Supers Association store. But Michael decided against it. For now, the slime couldn't reach him while he could still land shots from a safe distance. With this strategy, he could continue leveling up until his bullets ran out or his gun became ineffective. Then, he'd consider close combat. After circling around, following his previous path back to the room he'd first arrived in, avoiding unexplored areas to prevent running into more monsters, Michael finally managed to bring down the acid slime. You killed a common LV7 acid slime. You've gained 103 experience points. You killed a monster 5 levels higher than your own, earning a 6x experience multiplier. You've gained 618 experience points. Level up. You have leveled up to level 3. Level up. You have leveled up to level 4. You've leveled up to level 4 human. You've gained 0.4 stat points in strength, agility, and constitution. You've gained 1.0 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 4 attribute points. You've leveled up to level 4 Necromancer Apprentice. You've gained 0.2 stat points in strength and constitution, 0.6 stat points in agility, and 1.0 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 8 attribute points. Share to your friends. Chapter 2020 Clearing the Space. 2. After the acid slime died, Michael felt a surge of power flood through him. His mind sharpened, his strength increased, his defense tightened, and his speed quickened. I leveled up, Michael thought happily. Unlike the previous level up, where he only felt pain, this time he could clearly sense the changes that came with leveling up. And since he leveled up twice in a row, the boost in strength was even more pronounced. Excited, Michael immediately checked his status to see the results. Status. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level: 4, 2 carat. EXP: 48/600. Strength: 2.2, 0.6 carat. Agility: 5.9, 1.0 carat. Constitution: 4.0, 0.6 carat. Intelligence: 7.5, 2.0 carat. Attribute points: 13. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class skill: Contract Slot 08. Gift: Mark of Origin. Seeing his newly updated status, Michael felt a surge of emotion. In just a little over an hour in the land of origin, he had transformed into someone monstrous by human standards. What thrilled Michael most was the increase in his attribute points, the foundation of his power. The sight of 13 attribute points filled him with joy. 13 attribute points, including the one I saved from my previous level up. I gained 6 from leveling up to level 3 and another 6 from reaching level 4. Should I use them now? Michael was a bit conflicted, like having a sudden windfall without knowing where to spend it, even though the possibilities were endless. Considering how he might leverage these points for another power boost, Michael paid attention to his stats. My strength is now twice that of an average human. Even though it's my weakest stat, it's still very strong. For now, I don't need to increase it since I haven't felt the need. Strength wasn't a priority for a necromancer, but without any undead under his command, Michael was still essentially operating as a fake one. Then there was his agility. It increased by an entire point, bringing my agility to nearly 6 times that of an average human. I'm probably not inferior in speed to most level 8 to 10 monsters, unless they're specialized in agility. Michael felt confident in his assessment. Since monsters lacked attribute points and relied solely on their race for stat boosts, even a level 5 monster specialized in speed might barely edge him out in agility, if at all. For one, I haven't seen any monsters other than slimes in this building. For now, I don't need to increase my speed since it's already sufficient, Michael thought, moving on to the next stat, his constitution. Without hesitation, he added 1 point to his constitution, raising it to 5 times that of an average human. The reasoning was simple. More vitality meant he'd be harder to kill. Plus, seeing his attribute points at even numbers was visually satisfying. There wasn't much to say about his intelligence stat. For now, it remained largely useless. One intriguing aspect of stats was that, when a stat related to one's class reached increments of 20 points, there was a 50% chance of gaining a new skill. Sometimes, one could even gain skills related to other, unrelated stats for every 20-point increase. However, a 50% chance didn't guarantee a skill every 40 points. One could potentially accumulate 100 points in a stat without receiving any skill. With his 13 attribute points, Michael could have invested in intelligence to try unlocking a skill, but it would be a risky gamble. If he failed, there'd be no undoing it. Even though Necromancer Awakeners are rare, I doubt I'm the first whose starting location has made it inconvenient to have an undead. There should be a solution on the Supers Association forum. I'll check it out once I'm back. Ultimately, Michael decided to save his attribute points for later when he'd truly need them. His current strength was already sufficient. Closing his panel, he approached the corpse of the acid slime. Unfortunately, the only loot he found was the acid slime core, no spirit crystal this time. Michael wasn't too disappointed. He'd anticipated it. If spirit crystals were common, they wouldn't be so precious. Stashing the acid slime core in his mark of origin, Michael set off in search of more monsters. Share to your friends. Chapter 21, Clearing the Space, 3. 2 hours later, after thoroughly searching the abandoned building, Michael managed to kill 13 more slimes and leveled up. Unfortunately, even with this number, the experience he gained wasn't enough to raise his level by more than 1. As his level increased, it began to match that of the slimes in the building. The extra bonus experience points he earned from defeating higher-level monsters had little impact, as the strongest slime he encountered was only level 7. Most of the slimes Michael fought ranged from level 4 to level 5. Still, Michael wasn't discouraged. At least he wasn't in significant danger while leveling up. It was well known that as one's level increased, it became progressively harder to advance. There were 2 main reasons for this. 1, the risk factor. Fighting stronger monsters carried greater risks. Most Awakeners avoided recklessly endangering their lives and instead preferred steady, gradual growth. After all, they had time and no inherent bottlenecks. Sooner or later, their accumulated experience would lead to leveling up. 2, scaling challenges. As Awakeners grew stronger, so did the monsters. The advantage provided by attribute points diminished over time. For instance, common-grade monsters could only reach a maximum of level 21 with 3 stars. Any monster that could reach above level 21 was a rare-grade monster species, and the difficulty only escalated as their levels increased. While attribute points could allow Awakeners to compete with rare-grade monsters, they became insufficient against higher-grade foes. Of course, none of this had much relevance to Michael at the moment. He was satisfied that he had managed to reach level 5. The slimes also provided him with 4 spirit crystals and a good haul of slime cores. But these weren't his greatest gains. After killing the final slime, Michael finally discovered the exit to the building he was trapped in. The exit was wide open, revealing more abandoned buildings in the distance. Some of these structures had partially crumbled into dust, while others were overgrown with thick grass. Roots sprouted from the walls, similar to the building Michael was currently in. It was clear these buildings had been abandoned for a long time. Despite the temptation to leave, Michael didn't take a single step toward the exit. No, he didn't even dare approach it. Outside the exit was a staircase, and at the base of it stood a statue that blended seamlessly with the environment. If not for his caution and curiosity prompting him to use Detect on the statue, Michael might have overlooked its peculiarity. No, more likely he would have died. Gargoyle LV 21. Rank: Rare. An old gargoyle, weakened after years of neglect. A gargoyle, a creature once thought to exist only in fiction back in his previous world, now stood just 20 meters away from him. However, this one was wingless, but that was the least of Michael's concerns. "I'm cooked," he thought bitterly. His experience in the land of origin seemed cursed enough to rank among the top 100 most unfortunate starts for new Awakeners this year. First, he nearly died to a slime, and now it turned out the slimes were merely appetizers for the main course. Trapped in what he assumed was an abandoned dormitory, Michael's options were limited. He considered making the holes in the roof bigger and climbing his way out. With his current strength, he could likely jump high enough to reach the roof. But this plan had its risks. For one, the noise could attract attention. Perhaps the gargoyle outside had noticed him but refrained from attacking because he was already inside the building it guarded. Even if he escaped unnoticed, what guarantee did he have that there weren't other monsters? Possibly even stronger ones, lurking nearby? A rank 1, level 11 monster like the gargoyle was already far beyond him. Adding more threats to the mix wasn't a gamble he wanted to take. "I want my slimes back." Michael wanted to scream in frustration but held back, mindful of the gargoyle outside the building. Though he suspected the gargoyle might not come after him. He'd been in this building for hours, occasionally making noise. It wasn't a risk worth taking. Despite the dire situation, Michael wasn't in complete despair. At least he was still alive, and as long as that remained true, he could devise a way out. As thoughts raced through his mind, Michael made his way back to the spot where he'd first appeared. For some reason, this location always gave him a faint sense of comfort and security. Time to go back home. After several hours of running around, even though he was much stronger now, Michael was both physically and mentally drained. He carefully scanned his surroundings, ensuring no threats lurked nearby that could ambush his defenseless body. Only then did he sit down in a corner, taking out an energy nutrient from the Supers Association store. Ugh, tastes awful. But at least you won't starve, buddy, he muttered, patting himself as he swallowed the bitter liquid. Time to go back and look for solutions to my unwanted problems. Once ready, Michael disconnected his consciousness from the land of origin. Back in Aurora, his eyes slowly opened. F***CK, author's note. Good day, beautiful readers. Yes, I'm talking to you. This marks the end of Volume 1 for evolving my undead legion in a game-like world. Over the past 20 chapters, I've worked hard to establish a solid foundation for both worlds, the mechanics, and the main character. Starting from Volume 2, the story picks up pace as we dive deeper into the main plotlines. Michael will gain explosive strength and finally gets to use his talent while preparing for the Awakeners Academy exams. Thank you so much for making it this far. I hope you'll continue this journey with me. I have so much in store for all of us. Also, please share your thoughts about Volume 1, what could have been done better, what you liked or disliked, and what you're looking forward to in Volume 2. Share to your friends. Chapter 22, Clearing the Space. 4. Michael felt conflicted about his first day in the land of origin. On one hand, it had been exciting. He had narrowly survived being killed by a slime, escaping disfigurement by sheer luck. On the other hand, it was downright terrible. His first battle had been a life-and-death struggle against one of the weakest species, a slime, and just as things seemed to improve, he encountered an even bigger boss. Is this what they mean by being at the gate of heaven yet unable to enter? He muttered, still lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling in silence. But despite the chaos, Michael couldn't deny one thing. However, it wasn't like there weren't any gains. Though his first experience in the other world left much to be desired, it gave him what he sought: strength. Status. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level: 5, 4 carat. EXP: 114 out of 800. Strength: 2.5, 1.2 carat. Agility: 6.4, 5.0 carat. Constitution: 4.3, 3.1 carat. Intelligence: 8.5, 4.0 carat. Attribute points: 18. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival. Detect: New. Basic Shot: New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/10. Gift: Mark of Origin. Michael had only been in the land of origin for about 3 hours, yet compared to yesterday, when he first awakened, his growth was astonishing. Those seniors on the forum were so right. The land of origin is no game. Even though it looks like one, but it's truly an amazing place, he muttered in awe. A second later, his mood dipped into depression. Yet, even with all this growth, I still don't have any undead as a necromancer. My supposed highest stat, intelligence, is about to be overtaken by agility. Am I really a necromancer? Or am I becoming an assassin instead? Pausing, he chuckled bitterly. No, scratch that. I should be an archer. My only working skill is basic shot, and it doesn't even use mana. It's a physical skill fueled by stamina. Michael mockingly shook his head in helplessness as he stood and stretched his stiff muscles. Afterward, he grabbed his phone from the desk. 3:07, he read. That's roughly 3 hours spent in the land of origin. I left here a little after noon, and it was approaching noon there before I left. Aurora's time is probably 3 to 4 hours ahead. Of course, the time zones of Aurora and the land of origin were unrelated, being completely different worlds. Still, Michael used the time difference as an estimate. With that thought lingering, Michael sat in the chair by his desk and logged into the Supers Association forum on his phone. This time, he wasn't just searching for answers. He planned to ask directly. Michael had too many uncertainties, and searching blindly for solutions without even knowing the right terms felt like trying to find a rumored treasure in the middle of an ocean. Conflicting first day in the land of origin. Michael began by detailing his experiences. His initial location, the eerie ruins, and how, as a necromancer, his environment didn't offer any way to have an undead. He also explained the challenge posed by the rank 1 monster blocking his path and sought advice on what to do next. The Supers Association reportedly had over 70,000 awakeners, though Michael wasn't sure how many were online. The forum currently showed 10,000 active users. Surely, among them, someone, awakener or even cultivator, would have advice for his predicament. As Michael waited for his post to be verified, he browsed the forum to pass the time. He had barely reached the homepage when a trending topic caught his attention. Changes in the Federation. Huh? What's this? Michael muttered, intrigued. Changes in the Federation? He repeated thoughtfully, recalling something he had pondered back in the land of origin. The Federation's focus on awakeners had always seemed odd to him. Most people, especially younger generations, only knew that the Federation valued awakeners. The exact reasons remained unclear. They were also made to believe that cultivators were comparable to awakeners, with the primary distinction being cultivation speed. However, as a new awakener, Michael already knew this was inaccurate. He didn't claim to be an expert on cultivators, but access to the forum had expanded his understanding. For instance, a rank 2 Knight Elite, supposedly 10 times stronger than the average human, could easily be matched by a level 5 awakener who hadn't even advanced yet. In his view, cultivators were barely comparable to awakeners if they refrained from using attribute points. This was an undeniable gap, yet the public was deliberately led to believe otherwise. Michael suspected this misinformation served a purpose. Perhaps it was to prevent despair among those who failed to awaken, or maybe it aimed to avoid creating an intense social divide between awakeners and cultivators. This social divide was evident on the forum, but in the real world, most people likely saw awakeners and cultivators as only slightly different, both possessing great powers but nothing vastly superior. All of this seemed suspicious, and Michael felt certain only the Federation knew the truth. Now, staring at the trending topic, curiosity got the better of him. He tapped the post. /n. Please read the author's note added to the previous chapter and tell me your thoughts on the past volume and what you expect in this new volume and so on. Thanks for reading. Share to your friends. Chapter 2323 Posting on the Forum. The post's author was a level 2 member of the Supers Association, 1 rank above Michael. It had also been published just a day ago, taking that time to gain enough traction to trend on the forum. Changes in the Federation. Name, Billy Stormman. Level 2. Date published, Thursday, 18th of the 7th month. Year 228 of the new era, 1 day ago. I'm a mage commander studying at the Moonstone Cultivation Academy. A week ago, I returned home for vacation. Normally, when the academy grants a break to prepare for incoming college exams, we older students usually choose one of 2 options. Spend some time with our families before resuming training or head straight to the dimensional cracks for training. However, this post isn't about that. Since I have 3 months of vacation, I decided to spend some of it with my family, given I missed the opportunity last year. But to my surprise, when I got home, I noticed something strange. Whenever I come back, my younger siblings typically ask me ignorant questions about awakeners and cultivators. This time, however, they seemed to know more than I did before entering the academy. At first, I worried they had been dabbling in illegal channels to access classified information. But I quickly learned that their school had started teaching them this new knowledge. Curious, I asked some of my schoolmates who also went home for the break. They reported similar changes in their sibling schools, though it seemed this was happening mainly in big cities for now. I'm confused. Wasn't the Federation the one restricting information about supernatural professions, especially for children? Why are they suddenly releasing it now? If you check iTube, you'll find videos containing information we couldn't access in high school. I'm not personally affected, but I'm curious. Does anyone know what's going on? After reading the post, Michael's heart grew slightly heavy. The content of the post touched on something he had considered before. Seeing that others seemed to share his suspicions, or at least that his doubts were partially validated, left Michael deep in thought. Even the mention of the Moonstone Cultivation Academy, the first time he had encountered the name of a supernatural institute, failed to hold much of Michael's attention. In a way, this highlighted how severely information about the supernatural had been suppressed in this world. For students who began cultivating at a young age to remain unaware of the names of colleges they could potentially attend was telling. This kind of reminds me of those cultivation novels I read back on Earth, Michael thought. In those worlds, mortals knew of the existence of immortals, but anything beyond that was treated as forbidden or rare knowledge. The Federation has been suppressing information about awakeners and cultivators for so long. So why are they changing now? As a transmigrator, Michael had spent some time reflecting on the nature of this world, despite having been here for just over 3 weeks. Since his awakening, Michael had often wondered. Awakeners and cultivators were supposedly respected members of society, yet strangely little was known about them or their way of life. Occasionally, there were glimpses, videos, for instance, but even those were superficial. From Michael's current perspective, they appeared designed to mislead the public rather than inform them. The information taught in schools about awakeners and cultivators was even more lacking than he initially imagined. What was provided was the barest minimum, and while it might have seemed like a lot to the former Michael, the awakened Michael now saw how insignificant it truly was. If Michael had transmigrated as an adult without memories of this world, he might have initially thought it was simply a technologically advanced version of Earth. This realization underscored how, despite being a driving force in society, awakeners and cultivators were almost invisible. Perhaps this felt normal to most people in this world since it had always been this way for them. However, as a transmigrator, Michael's perspective was different. Initially, he hadn't bothered much about the situation since he wasn't even sure if he'd be able to awaken a class. If he had failed to awaken, and the Federation continued the way it did, the Federation's suppression of information would have ensured he remained ignorant about the supernatural, just like the majority of citizens. This was why the post he had just read struck Michael so deeply. He had 2 pressing questions. 1. Why had information about awakeners and cultivators been suppressed for so long? 2. Why was information being released now? What is happening in the Federation? Share to your friends. Chapter 24, 24 Thoughts. As several thoughts flashed through Michael's mind, he scrolled to the comments section under the post. I knew something like this was going to happen sooner or later. Though I get the Federation's point of view due to the tragic events of the past, they need to remember that they're raising humans. People, not animals in a cage. Those dogs have been in power for so long that it's gone to their heads. I agree with Senior's words, though I wouldn't dare to be as blunt, haha. New cultivator here. What were the tragic events that happened in the past? Are they the reason the Federation suppresses news about us? One particular comment caught Michael's attention. First, it was the audacity of the writer that stood out, though Michael decided to wisely ignore it, as it came from a level 5 member. Second, it was the content that truly intrigued him. Tragic events? What events could have possibly made the Federation so determined to suppress news about us? Curious, Michael continued reading the thread with heightened focus. After the new cultivator asked for guidance, another level 5 member stepped in to reply. Before I answer, let me ask you this. What happens when you put poor and rich people together in the same space? A social structure forms, Senior. And this social structure, who does it benefit? The rich, Senior. Exactly. To put it simply, the rich oppress the poor directly or indirectly, and this is for something as mundane as wealth. Now, what do you think happens when you put people with supernatural powers alongside ordinary humans who depend on them to survive? Back in the Dark Ages, a year after the dimensional cracks appeared and unleashed monsters, humanity's population plummeted to just 100 million. This and a few other things are what the kids nowadays are aware of. In truth, they know nothing at all. It was at the point of close extinction hope came. The arrival of awakeners gave humanity a fighting chance, and years later, the cultivators followed. This was the turning point when humans began to fight back. During those desperate times, survival was the priority, and there was little concern for status. However, as the situation improved, things changed. Ordinary humans idolized the supernaturals, and the supernaturals began to see themselves as superior. This mindset grew stronger as humanity stabilized. Awakeners and cultivators began treating ordinary humans as lesser beings, and ordinary humans, in turn, accepted this dynamic. It wasn't uncommon back then for a cultivator to kill an ordinary human out of anger, and both sides would see it as normal. Over time, things worsened. Some supernaturals turned into demonic beings, demonic cultivators or awakeners. One powerful mage once sacrificed 1,000,000 lives, and that was among the lesser tragedies. Others committed far worse atrocities. Oh, you might curse those demonic supernaturals, but remember, before they fell to darkness, they were once humans too. Even you can't deny that, with your powers, you've started to see yourself as superior to others. Reading this made Michael's heart heavy. The senior was right. Slowly but surely, he had begun to see himself as superior, not to humans but to cultivators. Yet, if he viewed himself as above cultivators, who were already higher than ordinary humans, wasn't he essentially agreeing that ordinary people were beneath him? With a heavy heart, Michael continued reading. He now knew what the previous Level 5 member meant by tragic events of the past. Yet, this still didn't fully explain why the Federation suppressed knowledge about awakeners and cultivators. When demonic cultivators grew more rampant, the powerful figures in the government stepped in to suppress them. But here's the brutal truth. We are indeed superior to ordinary humans. Denying this would be hypocrisy. And because of this superiority, the Federation decided to prevent another crisis by isolating ordinary humans from supernatural matters while creating a separate space for us. They suppressed news about supernatural's powers so ordinary people wouldn't realize the vast difference between them and subconsciously consider themselves inferior, just as in the Dark Ages. At the same time, they worked to redirect supernatural's focus away from meddling in ordinary people's lives. This led to the creation of two worlds, one for supernaturals and another for ordinary humans. Even cultivator trainees below college level are taught only how to cultivate, with martial discipline imposed on them much like ordinary humans. This created a sense of equality, and the method worked for decades, preventing the rise of demonic supernaturals. But alas, it also made us weaker as a whole. Billy Stormman, thanks for answering, seniors. We were taught about this in school, but I'm still confused. How does suppressing information about us make us weaker overall? And what does this have to do with the Federation releasing bits of information now? After reading the senior Level 5 member's words, Michael fell into deep thought. It was only after a while that he snapped out of it. Demonic awakeners and cultivators, the Dark Age, and the Federation's actions. I'm truly ignorant of the world I'm in. Michael's heart felt heavy. The senior's words revealed that he was surrounded by a fog of ignorance. Fortunately, as an awakener, he could slowly clear this fog and learn more about the truth of the world. Turning his attention back to the comments, Michael couldn't help but reflect. Though we were taught about the Dark Age in school, it was definitely not as revealing as this. The saying that history is written by the victors is true. Who knows how much of what we were taught as history is actually the truth? The more he discovered about the public's ignorance of the world they lived in, the heavier his heart grew. To some extent, he could relate to the senior's frustration. While he understood the Federation's desire to avoid creating an obvious social structure between supernaturals and ordinary humans, it also felt like they were treating humans like livestock. This realization left Michael conflicted. The Federation, which once seemed like the good guys, now felt much more ambiguous. Demonic cultivators. The senior said they were suppressed, not eradicated. Could they still exist somewhere in this world? The sense of security Michael once felt in the real world began to crumble. The waters of this world are indeed too deep. Aside from this revelation, Michael felt an even greater need to become stronger. My greatest strength is my class, so I can't leave the matter of undead unattended for long. My leveling speed is still too slow. And then there's the college exams to prepare for. Though I question the authenticity of these institutions after learning about the Federation's actions, Billy's comment under the senior's post shows there's still much to learn from them. But compared to my peers who awakened 2 years ago, and even those who awakened last year, I'm far behind. With only 3 months of preparation, there's little to no time. Michael clenched his fists, determination welling up within him. I must get stronger. As several thoughts flashed through Michael's mind, he turned his attention back to the comments section. There was something the senior had said that left him confused. We're weaker overall? Thankfully, Billy, the author of the post, had asked the same question, and another individual, though not a level 5 member this time but a level 3, responded. By saying we're weak overall, what the senior meant is that the public no longer has a strong drive for strength. You might think they do, but they don't. What happens in a world where the poor don't feel much different from the rich? Will they strive for wealth as a goal, or simply for convenience? I've visited the martial arts cultivator world before, and the commoners there are deeply oppressed by those in power. But compared to people in our world, those so-called commoners hunger for power with an intensity that moved me. Unlike here, where an 18-year-old who has failed their awakening will give up on gaining strength and settle for getting by in society. I agree with the senior. If the public truly knew the extent of awakeners and cultivators' power, and felt it, they'd hunger for it. That hunger would, in turn, boost our national strength. But in recent years, the number of new cultivators has been steadily declining. Perhaps the Federation can no longer ignore this and is being forced to take action, reminding the public of the supernatural elements available in their world. Our world is not as safe as the public believes. You, as a student of an academy, should know this better than anyone. Use every moment to grow stronger, for yourself, your loved ones, and our people. May the will of Aurora prevail for 1,000,000 years. Billy Stormman, thank you for your advice. May the will of Aurora prevail for 1,000,000 years. Share to your friends. Chapter 25 Truth of the World. May the will of Aurora prevail for 1,000,000 years. The sentence felt like a slogan, stirring something deep within Michael. Even the revelation of the level 3 member traveling to another world didn't catch much of his attention. In school, they were taught that some dimensional cracks from the Dark Age still remained. While most led to places filled with monsters, a few opened gateways to other realms like Aurora. They had also been told that these monsters were a significant reason why cultivators and awakeners were vital to society. Yet, the seriousness of it all had eluded him back then, as the topic was presented in a light, almost casual manner. Even combat classes felt more like physical education than actual preparation for life-threatening situations. Reading the comments section under Billy's post, however, shattered that illusion. Michael realized that reality was far harsher than what they were taught. Aurora wasn't safe. Whether the threat came from monsters, demonic supernaturals, or something else entirely, he didn't know. But one thing was clear: he needed strength. Whatever the Federation's motives were for gradually unveiling the truth to the public, Michael understood that he had to be ready for whatever followed. He tried to dig deeper into the comments, hoping to find more insights about the Federation's actions, but nothing else was as informative as the comments from the seniors. Most were either empty speculations or cheap imitations of what had already been said. Realizing he wouldn't find anything more useful, Michael dismissed the post. Curious about the truth of the world he lived in, Michael began searching for topics he had never considered before. His first search focused on the Dark Age, but the information available mirrored what he had been taught in school. However, when he searched for demonic supernaturals, he discovered new insights. Thankfully, his level 1 membership granted him access to this information. For one, his suspicion that demonic supernaturals still existed was confirmed. Michael learned that both the Federation and students from Cultivation and Awakener Academies occasionally hunted them. However, details about their recent actions or larger operations remained inaccessible to him. Still, knowing they were still a threat made his heart grow heavier. Next, Michael delved into dimensional cracks. Beyond the simplified descriptions given in school, where they were portrayed as harmless as neighboring countries, he discovered that the reality was much grimmer. It wasn't the monster-filled cracks that posed the greatest danger to Aurora, but those leading to other realms. These cracks introduced him to a new term: invader invasions. Michael learned that some civilizations on the other side of these cracks sought to expand their control over Aurora, resulting in ongoing wars. This revelation shocked him. Despite the end of the Dark Age, Aurora was far from safe. The public's ignorance was protected by the sacrifices of others, who fought wars that few could properly appreciate. Unfortunately, Michael's low authority level once again restricted his access to more information. Still, he gleaned enough to know that Academy students like himself were regarded as reserve soldiers for the Federation, tasked with defending Aurora from both internal and external threats alongside the military. Having frequently encountered references to supernatural academies in his searches, Michael made them his next research topic. In a few minutes, he learned more about his world than he had in all his years at school. This world isn't safe. I need strength to protect myself and my family. The Federation seems to have reached a dead end. I can only rely on myself. In the end, it all comes down to strength. With strength, the road ahead will be clearer. But even now, there are things I can and must do. Michael listed his priorities. First, I need to start fully utilizing my class advantages. Necromancers are known for having one of the fastest leveling speeds, as they earn a percentage of the experience from enemies killed by their summons. My class is also one of the strongest, capable of functioning as a one-man army, much like a beast tamer in the later stages. Wasting this potential would be foolish. Having an undead could also be the turning point for me to finally make use of my talent. I really hope it is. Then there's the college exam. With my current strength, getting into a top Awakener Academy is a pipe dream. Only cultivation academies might accept me due to my identity as an Awakener. But since this directly impacts my growth and access to information, I have to take it seriously. Lastly, I need to find a solution for the ruins I'm trapped in within the land of origin. If I don't, my growth will be even slower. After setting these goals, Michael finally turned his attention to his present situation. The Super Association system had notified him minutes ago that his post was approved, but he had been too engrossed in his research to check it. He hadn't expected immediate responses anyway and decided to wait. Returning to his post, Michael was shocked to find it had garnered over 30 comments and a surprising amount of traction. More than 30,000 views in just half an hour. The unexpected popularity stunned him. I hope I can find something useful, Michael muttered as he opened the comments section, only to be taken aback again. To his surprise, nearly no one seemed concerned about his struggles as a necromancer. Instead, the majority were fixated on his initial location, ignoring the topic of his post entirely. I don't know if I should call you lucky or unlucky. Lucky because you somehow stumbled into a ruin every Awakener prays for, and unlucky because you're too weak to explore it, stopped by a mere level 21 monster. A level 21 monster weak? Oi, that's a rank 1 monster close to the limit, Michael thought, feeling both attacked and embarrassed. Despite the sting, the comment made him pause. Ruins. Michael had read novels back on Earth where such places brimmed with treasures. But back in the land of origin, he hadn't been thinking about ruins. His focus had been on scouring dorm rooms for mist slimes, not the ancient significance of his surroundings. Curious, Michael continued reading other comments. Gargoyles are artificially created monsters, so it's almost certain you're in a ruin. As 3-star rare-grade monsters, their weakest are usually around level 20. Given your description of the ruin, it's clearly very old. Gargoyles don't lose levels even after 50 years, so the ruin you're in is at least 200 years old. The older the ruin, the more valuable its treasures. I'd say you're lucky, kid. Just don't die there before enhancing your strength by leveling up in real life. This comment, far more informative, caught Michael's attention. Checking the commenter's profile, he saw they were a level 4 member. Michael's curiosity deepened. He had recently searched for the meaning behind the Super Association's member levels and now understood their significance. A level 1 members, unranked to rank 1 Awakeners, and rank 1 to 2 Cultivators, Apprentice and Elite. A level 2 members, rank 2 Awakeners, and rank 3 to 4 Cultivators, Commander and Master. A level 3 members, rank 3 Awakeners, and rank 5 Cultivators, King level. A level 4 members, rank 4 Awakeners, and rank 6 Cultivators, Emperor level. A level 5 members, rank 5 Awakeners, and rank 7 Cultivators, demigod level. Realizing this, Michael felt a newfound respect for the seniors in the forum. Those level 5 members were akin to demigods in strength. They truly deserved to be addressed with such reverence. With his current power, Michael couldn't even begin to fathom the strength of a being addressed as a demigod. He also noticed a distinct pattern. Starting from rank 5 in the cultivation power system, king level, the gap between awakeners and cultivators began to narrow. An awakener rank was no longer comparable to 2 cultivator ranks, at least on the surface. Perhaps cultivators experienced a significant boost at king level, but Michael wasn't worried. Awakeners wouldn't stagnate either. They grew stronger with each rank advancement. Of course, a king-level cultivator was still far beyond Michael's reach and deserving of respect. The awakener who responded to his post was a level 4 member, making them comparable to an emperor-level cultivator, just below the demigod rank. As an awakener, they might even stand a chance against a demigod. It was clear this level 4 member was a senior as well. Michael hurriedly gave his thanks. Fortunately, I wasn't desperate enough to do something reckless. I might have missed this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Michael thought. Dying in the land of origin came with heavy consequences. Not only did one lose 10% of their stats permanently, but their location also changed. If Michael died in the ruin, he could kiss it goodbye. The senior's advice also reminded him of something he'd read earlier about dimensional cracks. These cracks were under Federation supervision, and gaining access required either Supers Association membership or Academy enrollment. While Michael wasn't an Academy student, his Supers Association membership granted him access to cracks within his member level's limit. This realization gave him hope. Now that he had clarity on his location, Michael shifted focus to the next issue. Fortunately, someone among these ruin-obsessed awakeners remembered I'm a necromancer in distress. Share to your friends. Chapter 26, 26 New Understanding.
一录2分钟，马上还有10秒。